Okay, it is S4A Livestream number 126 being recorded on March 20, 2025. It's been a while. The last stream that we did, number 125, never got posted. It was recorded about 2 months ago in the dead of winter. And we just chatted, basically. I wasn't streaming much in the last year. People who have listened to the previous live streams would note probably that I had said many times they kind of drained me a bit. I like doing the streams because there's a lot of regulars that show up in the chat, and it's nice to bring everybody together and to just do the thing that we do here. But it's so much me. And, anytime I do more of like an opinion video or something that's like my own analysis, definitely with the audiobooks, I can speak through those somewhat by selecting readings that I think are important or, that convey a particular message. And then I'll do some commentary in that. But I really like grounding it in that. And anytime that we go out into more of me, it takes me a while to sort of reset and pull back from that. Part of it's just like people give you tons of shit. I mean, I'm used to that by now to a certain extent, but I just like keeping things firing on all cylinders. And, live streams are live. They are what they are. Things come up and you can sort of like edit it down to the best bits, but still, it's just a lot to handle. So, in the last year, I haven't done quite as many streams. We did some around the election back in November. And then, like I said, one late January stream. This stream today should be more of like a classic read some articles, do some chat stream, because I did go through my open browser tabs and pulled some articles that I thought were interesting. So thanks to the people who sent in those, or thanks to the people on social media who posted those and I happened to see them there. But yeah, so live stream 126, we're back. And I haven't posted anything else this week. That's part of my strategy also. I've been really just on top of the audiobooks, posting like 3 to 5 audiobooks a week. And this week I haven't posted anything else, kind of trying to save my energy up for the stream today. So that's it. Somebody's saying that the audio levels are a bit high. They're looking good on the recording end, so I don't know. It's barely going into the red on my side. So actually I have it way down. It's minus 7.4 decibels. So is it distorting or something? Anyway, we got 70 people here, so that's cool. I guess, so I don't want this stream to be all chat. I've been kind of following along. Looks like people are just kind of, mingling and saying hi to each other. So going through, there's a lot of stuff I'd like to cover, actually. Let's start off with something that I just found hilarious. One of the things I've been doing is watching a lot of Elon Musk hate videos, which are, to me, really encouraging to see, heartening, because obviously the Trump administration, which has been purchased by Elon Musk, clearly, I think Musk dumped in like $300 million to the campaign or something like that. And now it's not clear at this point if Trump is sort of using Musk as somebody who can do this dirty work of slashing all these jobs. And it's terrible stuff. It's a full assault on anything in the U.S. government that was won through struggle. For regulations, for workers' rights, to protect people, basically. Obviously, the capitalist state is set up to maintain and expand capitalism. That is its purpose. The state always has a class nature, and the capitalist state cannot just be used to enforce workers' rule. However, in the course of struggle, particularly in the 20th century, there were a lot of concessions made, and there were functions within the U.S. government which worked to rein in some of the worst features of capitalism and give people some protection, whether it's environmental protection, and now they're talking about mass layoffs, cutting 2/3 of the employees at the EPA. Okay, I hope you like cancer, because even with the EPA there, bad things still happen. Without it, going to be even worse. So not good news. And like I said, it's been a full assault on any kind of regulatory functions in the government. Trump may be using Musk as somebody who will be the fall guy and disposable. Time will tell. It's been less than 2 months, or really just about 2 months at this point. And they've been doing so much. Trump just, this barrage of executive orders, and a lot of them are getting held up in the courts or overturned. They're, in some cases, ignoring the courts, but, I mean, obviously other parts of the behemoth of the U.S. government are not in complete lockstep with a Trump who, in his second term, this is a situation where I almost feel like I wish we had just gotten Trump out of the way with the second term, when he wouldn't have had, instead of Biden, who was, I thought, terrible, reminded me of George W. Bush. This 4-year period, it gave Trump time to step back and catch his breath and plot and get bitter. And, Project 2025 wouldn't be a thing. It would have been Trump beleaguered by dealing with the pandemic and everything else. And instead, we got a Trump who was rested up and was ready to go on day one with that executive order pen. And they're really doing this shock and awe campaign. And I think it's caught a lot of liberals who tend to dominate social media off guard. And they don't really know what to do. So you're seeing this flailing. But Elon Musk coming under a lot of scrutiny. In my opinion, Elon Musk, there's been a lot of biographies that have come out of him. Very unflattering things. He's a scammer, basically. In my opinion, Elon Musk is, if you ever watched that channel Scammer Payback, where they're, talking to the guys at the call centers in India, and they want you to send a $300 Applebee's gift card, through the mail in order to pay quote unquote Microsoft tech support. That is basically Elon Musk to me. He's a con artist. He's a scammer. And he has this insatiable need for credit and love that he never got from his parents, and he's trying to fulfill it through, just this deeply, deeply insecure guy chasing after money and power, and he just gets more and more fucking cringe and loathed the more that he extends himself. Anyway, he's also terrible at designing cars, apparently, because one of the few projects that he actually worked on as a quote-unquote engineer at Tesla just announced today all of the Cybertrucks, the monstrosity, which, by the way, look up the crash safety specs on Cybertrucks. They're worse than the infamous Ford Pinto at crash safety. Basically, the shape of the thing. People have learned, you look at old cars from the mid 20th century. The old, think of the Batmobile from the 1960s show. I mean, they were pretty elaborate, but we've learned a lot over the years about crash safety and engineering. I mean, at that point, there weren't even mandatory seatbelts. And cars look kind of boring today. And, that's, I guess we've lost something aesthetically, but they're so much safer in terms of if you hit something going 60 or 80 miles an hour. It's crazy to me. When I first started driving years ago, I mean, people really did, if you went over 60, you were kind of nervous about getting a ticket. People drive fucking 90 now, and it's just the normal state of affairs in a lot of places. But how times change. Anyway, yeah, cars are a lot safer. The Cybertruck is not. And also now the panels are falling off because they're glued on. They're fucking glued on. And they used some kind of glue, I guess, that is prone to environmental embrittlement. And so basically all of the Cybertrucks made from late 2023 till now, which is almost all of them, need to be, it's 46,000 Cybertrucks, need to go back, and they're going to unglue all the panels and then glue them back on again. You know what? Let me adjust them. I think I'm hearing now, it's not that the levels are high, the gain's a little too cranked, and I think it's distorting a little bit. Let me just get control the level here back up again. I think it was just distorting a little bit. Hopefully this won't be an issue for the final recording. There, that should be better, hopefully. Yeah, I think it was just peaking a little bit and getting a little bit distorted. All right, that should be better. So anyway, Elon Musk is doing some loathsome shit as far as deep austerity, just coming out of the gate, swinging I think I'm going to do a longer project about this at some point because it goes back with Musk and the PayPal mafia, which goes back like 25 years. And there's a lot of shit happening, whether it's the crypto reserve that was just announced by Trump as kind of like part of a pump and dump, and the guy that actually Trump put in charge of as the AI czar and the crypto czar, which are the same person by the way, is like a pump and dump artist, again from South Africa. So there is crazy stuff going on. It makes the first Trump administration, the first term, look kind of sensible by comparison. And I'm trying not to like OD on the news. But it's like every time I read it's just, it gets crazier like by the week. And it's been really hard. Somebody asked a question like, why are they cutting the USAID budget? And I started working on a thing to explain that. And then all this other stuff happened. So I'll probably do a video on this at some point if I can, I hope. But there's just so much happening right now. But at least Tesla is tanking. And one of the things about that is it looks like the stock market is massively overvalued. We've been talking about the likelihood of a recession, and a big one, for quite a while now, actually. And we're going to do some articles. I have a few things related to that. Not extensive. It's not like the main feature today, but I did want to talk about that. Just as far as like the too big to fail banks, and I forget where I was going with this. It's honestly enough to make your head spin. But the Tesla stock, that's what I was talking about. By some estimates, Tesla is like 80% overvalued. Like it's valued at something like, what is it, 800 billion? And actually the reality is it's probably worth more like 80 billion. And so nobody involved with the company is buying stock. They're all selling stock. And Elon Musk may be, as you can see here, Tesla backer says Musk must reduce Trump work as, basically your cars are literally falling apart out on the road. The panels, because of the glue that they used, and they're just going to use new glue, basically, is all they can do. These cars, which people bought for $80,000 or $100,000, literally the panels are falling off while people are driving in them. There's all kinds of things because Musk designed them to be, quote, apocalypse proof, which in his mind is when poor people swarm you and try to get into your car. They can't be opened from the outside. So there was just a really harrowing and horrific story about a Cybertruck catching on fire and a bunch of teenagers burned to death because people on the outside could not get the door open because they weren't meant to be open from the outside. So really just insane things going on over at Tesla. And the stock is back to it had a huge spike around the inauguration and a huge devaluing. It's currently kind of holding at the level it was at in the fall and summer last year. But as Tesla sales tank in Europe and also in the US, although in the US you have fewer alternatives, but in Europe you can get the Chinese BYD car, which is, people seem to be pretty happy with them and they're way cheaper. So yeah, Tesla, one of the Magnificent Seven stocks keeping the stock market afloat, probably hugely overvalued, and this is maybe setting the stage for like a gigantic stock market crash. Whole lot of stuff going on, very difficult to keep up with it all. So let's see what else we got coming up today. I just did want to mention also the subject of Barack Obama keeps coming up. Like, people keep saying because the Republican Party's in charge, where's George W. Bush? Won't George W. Bush come and speak out against what's going on in the Republican Party? Are you joking? I mean, the Bush-Cheney administration, I am firmly convinced, and I would love to do like an academic study on this at some point. Bush and Cheney were in office for 8 years, 2001 to 2009. What they did during that time was a radical transformation. I mean, U.S. politics were already right-wing. Reagan, had done a significant push to the right, the official start of neoliberalism. It was like the U.S. version of Thatcherism, Reaganism here. big gutting of the social safety net. There was still a lot left because it was a significant social safety net. But what Bush and Cheney did under the guise of the global war on terror after 9/11 was huge. I mean, they created the Department of Homeland Security, which didn't exist prior to that point, and all of this militarization of the domestic police state, and the integration of the high-tech surveillance. That was all Bush and Cheney, and it was a day-by-day thing watching the news in the Bush and Cheney years where people were aghast. It was unprecedented. People were horrified, and yet somehow people seem unable to remember that. But to me, that's what the Obama years, it quieted down significantly. At least they weren't doing it out in the open as much. We're back to this kind of brash, in-your-face, shock and awe approach. And no, I would not expect the person who was the figurehead of that rollout to come and speak out against the continuation and the phase 2 of that rollout. No, I would not expect that. You know who Democrats might want to put some pressure on is Barack Obama. I mean, you and I as communist or communist-leaning people might not expect that, but that would be the more logical thing for the, quote, opposition party to get, its last widely respected, perhaps wrongfully, but, fact is respected figure to come out and say something about, hey, it looks like Trump is trying to, with executive orders, dismantle everything useful to the average person in the U.S. government. And instead, he's out there tweeting about March Madness and just not commenting on what's going on, like, whatsoever. So, is he just encouraging it? Is he, like, cheering it on? But, yeah, Obama sucks. Just wanted to... somebody was saying in the chat how the Democratic Party is just flailing. And they really, really are. If you really think that democracy is in serious danger of going away, of becoming extinct, what are you planning to do about that? All of these Democrats specifically out there who seem to so far be mostly confining themselves to punching left and just screeching at people who didn't vote for their terrible candidate. By the way, people haven't forgotten about universal health care. That's still a thing people need. And actually, Tim Walz, the Kamala vice presidential candidate, did an interview. I couldn't believe a major Democrat said this out loud. But he said in an interview, I don't think the Democrats are going to win another election until we tackle this universal health care thing. I mean, Joe Biden in the last debate when his higher cognitive functions were clearly just melting down in real time on that debate stage with Trump, after sputtering and, just saying like word fragments, not even sentence fragments for a while, finally just uttered, "We finally beat Medicare." And that was, of course, the moment, more or less, when Trump won the election. Goes back to Trump and he said, I don't know what he just said there, and I don't think he does either. Dead in the water, dead. You're done. There's no recovering from that. And in fact, they didn't. But we finally beat Medicare. No, you didn't. Your party is never going to win again if you don't. I was actually thinking the same thing, and then Walz said it out loud. Yeah, the Democrats, that's what your base wants. Your base, like the party leadership, is so far to the right of the people who even consider voting Democrat. And you're going to keep losing. In this election, even if Kamala had gotten all of the third-party votes, both for the left-wing candidates and the right-wing candidates, if she had gotten them all, she would have still lost the election. So that's how far behind the Democrats are at this point, and that's why we're here. But to the people saying, Trump's going to dismantle democracy, I mean, what are you prepared to demand, and what are you prepared to sacrifice to get effective political resistance and an effective political movement going again? The labor movement has been decimated, and that was definitely on Boomer's watch. The gutting of the labor movement, all the talking points from the 80s and 90s, labor unions served a purpose once, but they went too far, and all this kind of stuff. Boomers bought into that big time as a whole, and not to a person, but I mean that was the trend for sure. A lot of, there's a lot of Reagan Democrats in the 80s and so on. There's a lot of buy-in for neoliberalism and this whole turning away from class struggle in the U.S., such as it was even, at that time. But we're here now. Labor movement is at basically an 80, 90-year low. It was looking for a minute there a couple of years ago like it was up a percentage point or two, but we're talking about it went from 10% of the workforce to like 11 or 12%, and it's basically held steady there. It's at the bottom. The labor movement, organized labor, is at a historic weak point, and that's typically what would be on the front lines resisting fascism, is your labor movement. But the Democrats have helped to gut the labor movement. Democrats have been talking, for example, about doing card check legislation for a long time, which would vastly streamline and simplify the labor union election process. Basically, now if there's a union effort, people sign A cards, authorization cards, saying I authorize this union to represent me. And then if you exceed a threshold, it'll trigger the National Labor Relations Board, NLRB, to do an election. But that's delayed 6 to 8 weeks, which gives the employers time to terrorize the organizers. And what often happens, like a lot of the larger unions, they'll refuse to even consider it unless you get 70% of the proposed bargaining unit workers to sign it, because they know in that 6 to 8 weeks between submitting the A cards and the actual election, management's going to drive off a lot of people. So they need 70% just because they know they're going to lose at least 20%, and you need 50% plus one to win. What card check would do is if you turn in 50% plus one, so like let's say that there are 20 people in the proposed bargaining unit. If you turn in 11 A cards, boom, you don't have to wait for the election, because what it means is that if the election were held that day, you would win. And so it's like, all right, well, that would vastly simplify the process. We would get a lot more labor unions. And then from a communist perspective, there would have to be a lot of work to improve the class consciousness and ideology in order to get people more militant and not just reformist and concessionist and et cetera. But if you don't even have the union, it's hard to even work on that, right? Anyway, they've been talking about that. They've done nothing about it for all of this time. And now we're at a point where, okay, Donald Trump is, to me, it's like the door had been rotting for a while. Bush and Cheney kicked it in. Now Trump is inside and he's wheeling out furniture. So we're done. This is the end game. I don't think they have really anywhere else to go after this. They're really trying to come for the last final pieces of it. And who's around to resist? So, to the Democrats and liberals who are concerned about this, are you organized? Are you armed? What are you willing to do here at this point to oppose the tearing down of the vestiges of capitalist democracy here? And then what's your opinion on what's going to happen after, in the event that they do manage to tear it all down, which there's a significant likelihood of? What are you going to do then? I mean, really, what's your plan? You think about politics a lot. You read the news. What are you going to do then? Because, I'm talking to you as somebody who has been looking at this for 20 plus years, since Bush and Cheney, knowing it was going to get to this point. Well, we're here now. And it's like people are trying to absolve themselves of any responsibility for preparing for this, even though the writing was on the wall for decades, literally decades. And now it's here, and you want to pretend like this just came out of nowhere. It didn't come out of nowhere. You've had time to prepare. What have you done? Show me your work. What have you got? It's time that people start really getting ready here for mass resistance. And like I said, it's only been 2 months, so I get that people are still trying to collect their thoughts, but it's on. I mean, what we can expect for the next 4 years from this administration is more of a full-on assault. And they came out swinging, and Democrats are absolutely not ready. Calling them the orange Cheeto or whatever, that's nothing. That's playground talk. It doesn't matter. What are you going to do to resist and shut things down and fight back? Anything? Because I'm not really seeing it. I don't see those mass organizations. All right. We'll leave it at that. I have definitely had that in my mind. Wasn't necessarily expecting that to come out. Let's, talk, continuing the discussion about mass resistance. One of the main fronts that they've been attacking on, aside from coming after all the federal agencies that protect people at all from the gross excesses of business, is they are scapegoating. Of course, they're scapegoating trans people, LGBTQ plus people as a whole, but particularly trans people are being singled out. Why? Because they calculated that that's probably the segment of the LGBTQ plus population with the least amount of mass support. Like, there's a lot more public sentiment that indicates acceptance of LGBT people, but there's still some mixed feelings about the T and Q. So, okay, let's attack them. That was basically, I think, the calculation, because they need a scapegoat. Again, if the kind of economic crash that I think is coming, boy, are they going to need to divert people onto something else, and that's a big part of it. But also, immigrants to the U.S. This is another major, and there's huge crackdowns is where a lot of the police state, part of DHS, ICE, is focused. And so this is from United We Dream, and the title of it, How U.S. Citizens Can Protect the Immigrant Community from the Deportation Force. So let's read. Now more than ever, it is important for U.S. citizens, allies of immigrants, to support the immigrant community by taking real actions if they witness a raid by Trump's deportation force. But what can you do? Here are some ways you can support. So take notes. If you see ICE checkpoints, you could ask why they're stopping, searching vehicles, and where they are taking individuals who are being detained. Like we saw that in the case of the Palestinian activist who was just arrested. They took him by people who did not identify themselves as cops in plain clothes to an undisclosed location. So, this is like when they were snatching people off the streets in the Pacific Northwest during the 2020 BLM protest. You can expect more fascist police state techniques like this. Next, if ICE is asking for ID on a train, bus, or other space, refuse to show your ID. Ask questions about why they're there in the first place, and put yourself between ICE agents and undocumented individuals. And again, this is aimed at people who have U.S. citizenship because our rights are more secure. So we have, firmer footing as far as putting ourselves between the deportation force and the more vulnerable people. So, are you prepared to do this? This is something that you need to bring up in your local groups and practice doing and role play and get used to it. It's when the time comes, you got to have some confidence in your ability to actually do these things. Next, if ICE agents are seen posted outside of homes, inquire who they're searching for and why. Then ask for a warrant and remind people of their rights. And there's a flyer here, what to do if ICE comes to your door. You can, by the way, go to this website at unitedwedream.org to get these flyers, post them around your town or city, and make sure that people know this. You can still, online is a great place to spread information, but not everybody's online. And it's also more real to just see it in your community. So what to do if ICE comes to your door? Do not open doors. They cannot come in without a signed warrant by a criminal court judge, and they can only come in if you let them. There's a lot of other videos. If you just type in "Know Your Rights," police knock door or something like that, there's a variety of tips. Like if they come to the door, first of all, there's no law that says you even have to answer the door, right? So that's number one. If you do answer the door, I've seen things like if you step outside and then pull the door shut behind you. What you don't want to do is just stand there with the door hanging open, because then they can just look over your shoulder and claim that they, saw something that gave them some exigent reason to to enter the premises. You don't want to just stand there with the door hanging open. So do not open doors. They can't come in without a signed warrant. Remain silent. ICE can use anything you say against you in your immigration case to claim your right to remain silent. Say, I plead the Fifth Amendment and choose to remain silent. Do not sign anything ICE gives you without talking to an attorney. Report and record. And so there is a United We Dream hotline there, 844-363-1423. Take pictures and video unless you're on federal government property. Take notes of badge numbers, number of agents, time, type of car, and exactly what happened. And this is scary stuff, and they're probably going to harass you and threaten you and try to physically intimidate you. So again, this is where like role playing with a local political group that you're a part of can be helpful to just, find out ahead of time before everything's on the line how comfortable you are or not, or what you have to work on. And fight back. Get a trustworthy attorney and explore all options to fight your case. If detained, you may be able to get bail. Don't give up hope. Join your local team to defend yourself from enforcement. And of course, law is a rich person's game by and large in the U.S. However, there is free legal help available in almost every area. One resource you can use to find it is findhelp.org. Put in your zip code. You can actually get help with all kinds of stuff, free money for like help with rent and utilities and all kinds of other stuff. But one of it's free legal help. That's one of the categories. Or you can contact, places like this immigrant rights agency. People involved with this type of work are very aware of the kind of climate that is coming down from the extreme right government and has been for decades now as they continue to scapegoat immigrants. So do get in contact with that. Don't try to face this alone. There are resources out there. That's why I'm always telling people connect with your local left, because you might not know about the resources that are there. But if you talk to people, and it's not just looking on websites, you got to pick up the phone and call and actually talk to people. They may have what you need, or they may not have what you need, but know of where you can go to get it instead, because people who are professional resource providers, they're oftentimes aware of other programs, not just the one that they're working on. So anyway, the graphic on the right here, know your power, record and report. Step 1, ensure that audio and recording is on and ready to be used and linked to a cloud. So it's not just, if they take your phone, that goes, the record, whatever you were recording goes with the phone, record to the cloud. Step 2, get information of the officer's name, badge, and agency. Step 3, narrate the date, time, and location of the event. So get that right down in the video or audio. Step 4, do not disclose the information of your loved ones or yourself to the agents. Don't give yourself away. Step 5, report it to the MigraWatch hotline and send your video or pictures to MigraWatch. That's MIGRA watch at UnitedWeDream.org. Always remember, you have the power to make choices. You have a choice over your safety, how you respond, and what you choose to share. So you're not in control of their actions. You're not in control of the ways that they may approach you, but you are in control. And they'll try to use methods on you, whether it's body language or leading questions or whatever, to try to confuse and elicit, put you off balance and try to elicit particular responses from you, which are helpful to them. But this is where you have to practice standing your ground and not getting thrown off. You have a choice about how you respond. And when in doubt, do nothing, by and large. Then they have a link there, unitedweDream.org/knowyourpower. So I think there's another thing or two out of this list. So continuing that list from before, if you see someone being detained, ask why is the person being detained? Ask where they will be transferred to. Then follow guidelines on recording the interaction, as we just discussed. Record badge numbers, license plates, and everything that happened in the incident by writing it down and videotaping, because as we see, they sometimes try to throw people in unmarked vans. If all you can get is a license plate, even if you can just get the make, or even some, if there's like a scratch on the vehicle that might identify it, like that may down the line be something that the lawyer that is, helping with the case may be able to use, when they give it to their investigators to try to track down what happened to people who got rounded up. So writing it down and videotaping everything that happened in the incident as much as possible. Try to learn and document what role ICE officers and local law enforcement, there may be multiple agencies, played during the activity, the roundup or raid. Identify folks who would be interested in risking arrest to support stopping the raid. So there may be ways that people can, who are willing and, have a firmer legal citizenship standing to put their bodies on the line, even delay agents during a raid possibly. Some of this may be legal. Some people would be willing to even break the law to try to hold it up so people can, get away or whatever. Next, you can create a group with a plan to respond to raids, assign roles, and examine the potential strategy on how to stop the raid. For example, Arizona folks stop an ICE vehicle from taking folks. So that was an example of people putting their bodies on the line to actually stop people from being taken into custody. Know your rights as a U.S. citizen. You have a right to be present. And this is hard because as they roll out more and more legislation, it can be hard to keep up. But this is why, being in touch with places that offer free legal support for immigrants can be really important because they will be more up to date on what the law is this year or this month. So you have a right to be present, observing, bearing witness, praying, photographing, and videotaping, although your right to videotape a law enforcement action may vary by state. There are now laws against taping certain police in certain places. So that, again, you may need to consult legal authority to find out what the actual law is and, what's the limit of your rights where you live. If ICE warns you and asks you to step back while videoing or photographing, it's best to follow directions because they may confiscate your camera. So, if stepping back is going to make the difference between you being able to videotape for another few minutes, that may, well be worth it rather than, if all you gain is sort of like an ego boost by being like, no, you can't tell me what to do. Well, these people are on the biggest power trip that you could possibly believe. So, just keep your longer term priorities in mind at that point as far as what's the most important thing that you need to be doing at that moment. And it might be continuing to record rather than giving that agent a piece of your mind at that particular time. You have to be strategic is what I'm trying to say. And then lastly, assign someone to de-escalate the situation if you're able to gain space while activity is happening. So people trained in de-escalation tactics, that's another thing. If you get involved with local left groups, there may be people who are trained facilitators and de-escalators. You can ask to be trained in that too. So this is why you have to get out there from behind the computer, from behind the social media, get out there, talk to people. You can gain actual real world skills. Also, know that supporting the community isn't just about trying to stop a raid. It's also about mobilizing and organizing people to help with the fallout of the raid when families are being separated. So, people get hauled off. That sets in motion a whole chain of events that's going to have to be dealt with. Maybe that person was the breadwinner. Maybe people are going to need groceries, or they're going to need help with communicating. Whatever it is, there's going to be a lot of support that needs to go on. And this is why, I was talking with somebody in the comments on YouTube recently about organizing general strikes, and they're like, oh yeah, we don't even need in-person organizations. We can just organize a general strike online. I'm like, no, you actually need to have relationships with people because there's actually a huge amount of trust and support, and people maybe letting you into their home to help with something. This is where people need to actually know each other and be able to vouch for each other. There's trust in personal relationships there. And they're like, you're talking about some kind of personal empowerment cult. I'm like, I'm not sure you've actually done any kind of work like this. Maybe you should just sit back a little bit. And, that's not how any activist or, left community I've ever seen engaging in supportive mutual aid or any other kind of work has actually functioned before. Not just, again, you can spread information online, but that is in furtherance of what you can actually bring to the table in real life, where relationships between people happen and the building of organizations and solidarity happens. But it's not an abstract thing. You like have to get to know the people you're organizing with and be able to communicate with them. So anyway, you can also start a list of local pro bono, that means free, immigration lawyers that are willing and ready to provide services for people being detained. And again, I mentioned findhelp.org and put in your zip code. You can also just do free legal aid and then your city or county, and that may return something, although you got to be careful with the search engines, because search engines, a lot of what's there is people who have money to advertise stuff, and the agencies that give stuff away for free and the nonprofits don't always have money to advertise. That's why it can be better to go to somewhere like findhelp.org, and there's just lists of people or organizations and agencies that don't have an advertising budget but still exist, and you wouldn't be able to hear about them otherwise. So last two things: be ready to show up and do a vigil at the ICE field office, detention center, or jail where people are being held, to advocate for those immigrants to be released on bail, and be prepared to launch a call-in action to call and demand that ICE field office releases folks who were detained. And let me add there, when you're doing a vigil or a protest or anything like that, look up how to write a press release and have a media liaison within your activist group be in charge of that, or 2 or 3 people in charge of that. Send out a press release to every news agency, both the local news, kind of like mainstream corporate news. And you'd be surprised, local news agencies, a lot of times they have nothing to cover except for, the local bake sale. And they may cover your protest. That honestly might. They might not, but there's a good chance that they will. And send it into alternative media as well. Don't just do it in the comments. Like, try to send it through their regular email contact or something like that. But yeah, press release can go a long way. Even if you get one news agency to cover your thing, that can be the sort of breakaway thing that you need. Send it into Democracy Now! Send it into wherever, Status Quo. The people are doing some kind of journalism about real world events. All right. So let me go ahead and catch up with the chat here for just a minute. We have a lot more I'd like to get to today, but let's catch up with the chat, because there's 90 people in here, and I'm sure that there's a lot going on. What I'm going to do is actually, I may end up missing some things, but I'm going to start at the bottom and scroll back up. I'm sure I'm going to miss some things, but there's no way that I'm going to be able to catch up with the chat otherwise. Okay. On local news, I hope everyone browses their local paper. You get all kinds of local politics that way. Yeah, actually, you can just also, like, if you have a YouTube account, find your local news stations, subscribe to them. They usually upload like every day. And again, a lot of it's, new business open on Main Street. But sometimes there are interesting and important things going on to be aware of. So, yeah. Scroll up a little bit. My face ended up on local news coverage at a protest, and my boss had a chat about it with me. Definitely mask up. Yep, absolutely. That's a consideration. And again, if you're involved with a local group, this will be probably part of the protocol that people are already aware of and will orient new members to. So, you don't have to reinvent the wheel here. Get involved with an established group. There's probably going to be people who've been doing this for a while and will be able to think of all these things and tell you about it. Just today, I saw some Democratic Party representative call for a general strike at some town hall, and it got mass applause. Yeah, I saw that. And a poster on Blue Sky was saying, is the Democratic Party prepared to put resources into that? This is the point where, which way are you going to go? We know if you go to opensecrets.org, you can see who donates to the Democratic politicians. It's not, and we've covered this on a previous live stream in depth. It's not exactly the same. Like the building trades tend to donate more to the Republican Party. And I think the railroads tend to donate more to the Republican Party. But by and large, like banks, medical industry, like the top 10 donors to the big Senate Democrats and Senate Republicans, they're basically the same. There's a couple of differences in the top 10, but like 8 out of 10 of them are the same. They're just in a different order. The Democratic Party is an imperialist party also. There is this historical legacy of it used to be more of like a left labor party, and the opportunist labor politicians would get involved with the Democratic Party. I mean, those days are basically, well, they're gone in the sense of the Democratic Party doing much of anything useful for labor. The days are not gone of labor continuing to funnel money into this party in the vain hope that they're really going to serve the working class needs. But this also goes into like the, corrupt politics. I don't just mean corruption of like taking money. I mean the corrupt opportunist politics, watered down capitalist politics of the labor leadership, and we'll cover that in more depth at some point. The AFL-CIA, as people call it. Try searching for the Obama Citigroup memo on Google and then search for it on DuckDuckGo. The results were very different when I tried it. A general strike will require the residents of every residential block to all know and talk to each other. The level of organization and mobilization will be several orders of magnitude greater than anything the USA has seen in my lifetime, like more people knocking on doors and talking to each other than during the Obama campaign. Yeah, and actually this was a reason why I gave money to Bernie Sanders in 2016, was because it was getting people out and talking to each other and having discussions. And yes, Bernie Sanders rolled over, as I like to say, picked up the U.S. left and then dropped it on its head about a year later, but did pick it up for a while. And people, for a moment at least, got a taste of what it's like to have a dream and the possibility, like have the thought, hey, actually, maybe we can do this for real. And it did get people out and got people out of this like sustained learned helplessness and feeling of despair that people have been in this country as things have gotten worse and worse and worse, since Reagan. It's been a horrible 50 years, So even going back a bit before Reagan into Carter and then, like Nixon before that, it's been rough, the neoliberal turn as capitalism went into a crisis of profitability and started cracking down on cutting costs and cutting power to the working class in all different ways. But absolutely, when we talk about the labor movement, we're talking about people power. Yes, ultimately it comes down to withholding our labor power in strategic ways to achieve particular goals. But we're talking about people power. That's what it is. That's where labor power comes from, is people's capacity to do work. And you got to have, like, why a lot of these things were stronger in the early 20th century was, now I'm not going to go all like trad here. That's not what I mean. But like more traditional society was intact. Like people weren't just totally atomized and just watching TV or on their phones all the time. Like people did know their neighbors more. All the neighborhood kids would play together. And there was just more of a kind of like social fabric. That's, I guess, what I mean. Whereas today it's like super tattered. Everybody's afraid of each other. Like, it started in the 80s and 90s where the American response to like any problem that came up was, who do I sue? And so it became this society where everybody's just constantly attacking each other. And now you get, public freak out videos and everything, public meltdowns, and people going Karen, in the parking lot of their residential complex or whatever. And that stuff's always existed to some extent, but there were other ways of getting things done before. People knew who lived in the neighborhood, and they would get out and make a point of talking to each other and, oh, is that your kid? And this and that. And like, again, we're still human beings. Like we still have basically all those same evolutionary drives that like got us to survive at this point. But the pressures of capitalism, decade by decade in the last century, have definitely eroded at our behavioral patterns that we would probably otherwise be more inclined toward. So yeah, people absolutely, in order to build the kind of community where you're going to stick with a strike when things get tough, or, you would even consider hiding somebody in your house against like an immigration raid or whatever. I mean, we got to build that level of community way back up again. And again, the labor movement is kind of like the main vehicle for the proletarian class. And we had a lot of work to do, so I agree with that comment. It can also help with job searching. I've been trying to help a friend with his chapter of Pride at Work, and it has a lot of union connections. So there you go. Yeah, there's all kinds of advantage. You know, people, who's watch The Walking Dead, will put a more positive spin on the phrase "people are a resource." It really is true. I mean, people have wants and needs and desires, and one of them is connection. And humans are very social creatures. We're not really meant to survive alone. We're meant to survive as groups, helping each other, of all different ages and all different energy levels and all different outlooks and orientations. Diverse communities of people working with bonds of solidarity with each other. You can get so much more done. And that's why I always tell people connect with your local left, because you're going to find out about and connect with resources that you're just not going to find out there on your own. The internet's not going to give it to you. The internet, again, like the search engine's more about finding people who want to get something from you. That's why they advertise. They think they're going to make money off of you. We need a fundamentally different approach, and it involves, getting to know the resources that are out there. And that means building relationships with the people around you. Can't emphasize this enough. It's the fundamental principle of when we talk about organizing. We can, when it comes to building a vanguard party, there are particular methods and a particular kind of structure and tactics that we need to use for that party. As far as the mass movement, we need a society of people who aren't afraid of each other, as kind of a prerequisite. But getting involved with people, it can turn you on to so many resources and enrich your life in ways. And I'm not talking about you're going to become a millionaire. I mean, you can get what you need, and you can have a rich and fulfilling life by, finding what's going on, the activities, and sharing meals with people and getting involved in activities. It's been shown in sociological studies that the poorer you are in America, the less likely you are to be involved, like a member of any organization, even a bowling league or something like that. And these are the people when, to take a really simple example, when you need to move a couch, yes, you can hire movers. That costs money. If you don't have the money, you need a friend. And the more people you know, the more likely it is you're going to hit it off with people who you develop a greater degree of trust with. And then you're not in it alone anymore. And you get other people willing to band together. These are, I think, fundamental things that U.S. society and just the basic fabric of it is so frayed. We need to learn how to just talk to each other again. I think that's a really, really important point. I'm definitely not going to be able to read all the chat today. I do hope that people are getting a lot out of the chat and talking to each other in there. Let me just scan for a couple more comments here. So people talking about legal clinics at UCLA, UCSD, UTEP. So yeah, as far as resources, if you're anywhere near a college or university, particularly public ones, but not necessarily exclusively, there may be events and workshops and clinics that you can attend for free or for $5 or something like that. Yeah. My union has us doing a lot of role-playing activities when organizing or talking to bosses. It seems cringe, but it's really helpful. Yeah, a lot of times those things that can seem corny, like, oh, we're going to go like play pretend now. What are we, 5 years old? No, it really helps because you've got to be able to project confidence in situations like that. When we're talking about union organizing, we're talking about a power struggle. And how you come off moment by moment in that interaction with the boss. What you're trying to do basically is, there's a lot of traditional goals associated with union organizing. For example, winning the election and getting a contract. Like there's a lot of things that people think of. But overall, how you would describe what the general point of a union is to shift the balance of power away from the bosses, the capitalists who own the workplace and their agents, the managers and people who can hire and fire and all that, toward the workers. You're trying to shift the balance of power away from the bosses toward the workers. And that can take various forms, and there can be, particular things like you might want a contract at some point or whatever. But overall, what you're trying to do is shift the balance of powers. That's what we're talking about. Is normally the default and the law protects the boss has the right to dictate what's going to go down in that business place. and they have the right to call the shots. But as a worker, you want more of that power. So the union is about shifting that power over to your side. And that means collaborating with the other workers because your strength is in numbers. If an ICE agent does overstep on this, emboldened by the crumbling respect for another person's rights, it's just another sign that their actions weren't in the right to begin with. Yeah, I think this speaks to how far the right wing is overextending themselves in defense of capital at this point. I mean, the Trump administration has been, and this kind of brings us full circle, has been really extreme. And again, this reminded me of Bush and Cheney so much because it was this like unprecedented assault where you had the Patriot Act, and then it just went from there of like the new measures being introduced all the time, and this just huge tone change where they were terrorizing the U.S. population. And a lot of people were, buying into it. And they're getting plastic sheeting and duct tape, out in the middle of Nebraska to prevent against an Al-Qaeda gas attack in a town of 300 people. That's how freaked out people got. People got really messed up by this stuff. It's happening again. They're doing it again. Why are they doing it? There's another crash that's coming. We're in a gigantic bubble right now. You can see it if you look up the housing market, the Case-Shiller housing prices, I find is a great example of this because house prices are a very strong indicator of what is going on as far as speculation. And what you can see if you look back at the Case-Shiller, let me see if I have one here. We'll just look at this one. Yeah, this was a screenshot from a video titled "The Biggest Mortgage Collapse in U.S. History is Happening Right Now." But this is the Housing Price Index, inflation adjusted, 1890 to 2023. So what do we see in the post-war period? So we go, there is a big price increase. Basically, there was a long lull between 1910 and about, the late 40s or mid 40s, basically the post-war period. So then it's stable for about 30 years, roughly. Then what do you see? You see a number of, we're basically in the fifth spike. It starts in the early 70s. And there was basically a huge situation in 1974 with a recession. And it's been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. This is also, again, politically why they have been doing neoliberalism, because they can see that the system is going into a crisis of striving after bigger and bigger profits. And, Marx talked about the declining rate of profit due to conversion over time from enterprises focused on variable capital, actual workers doing work, to constant capital, more and more machinery, in other words. And the actual source of profit is in the variable capital. That's where you get the surplus value. If you just have machines doing it, that you're not getting profit out of that. You get profit from exploiting labor. So anyway, what we see is the system going deeper and deeper into crisis as reflected by housing prices. Because why? Well, increasing amounts of speculation, and there are different reasons for that. Well, one of the reasons is investors are always looking for places to put their money to get bigger returns with, less risk, less effort. Stocks and bonds are usually the typical, like if the stock market's doing well, people put their money there. If bonds are offering better returns, then they put their money into bonds. That's kind of like the typical thing, the seesaw that goes back and forth between those. But increasingly in recent decades, housing, it's not just a place to live anymore. It's a place for capitalists to try to make lazy money, except it's a basic need. And so this really upends people's lives. So going back to the early 70s, you see that little spike, and then it goes back down. And then in the late 70s, there's a bigger spike, and it goes back down. Then around, the late 80s into 1990, there's a bigger spike, and it goes back down. And then housing prices come back to that 130-year average for most of the 90s. And then in 2000, late 90s, we had the dot-com crash. So the stock market crashed. Basically, the internet was really picking up steam, and anything associated with .com. People were just dumping money into it, much like is going on with AI now. It was this emerging future-oriented technology, and everybody felt it was going to be a game changer, but nobody knew exactly what was going to be profitable. So people were dumping money into anything internet, anything .com, and guess what? A lot of it did not have any feasible plan to make money. So lots of money was invested into websites that never made a dime. Same thing with AI. The question is like, AI is the future. Okay, there's been enormous hype that AI is going to solve every problem that ever existed, generate tons of value. It will probably in some ways, but nobody is quite sure yet exactly where the money's going to come from. So huge biblical amounts of money are being dumped into AI very haphazardly and pumping up the stock prices, as we we're just talking, for example, about Tesla, probably about 80% overvalued, setting the stage for a massive, massive crash. Anyway, similar thing happened around 2000, 2001 with the early internet, and there was a huge stock market crash. So was this one of the factors maybe that led investors to say, I want to get into something with, steadier, like just less risk, basically. And while housing became this huge thing, and there was a lot of things wrapped up in the 2008, you get a housing bubble, 2005, 2006, 2007, it starts to pop, 2008, global financial crisis. There's all kinds of stuff wrapped up in that. It's not just housing itself, but it definitely gets reflected in the housing market. Well, now we're in something even bigger than that. My question looking at this is how many more times can it go through this before the system is just done? How much more instability can build up? How much more entropy builds up in the system before it breaks for real, before it hits that final crisis from which it really cannot restabilize? And, as I was saying, labor movement down around 10% in this country, never been a worse time for that, because there were a lot of predictions in the 1920s and 30s that capitalism was on the ropes. Obviously it wasn't. That the crash of 1929 and the Great Depression was it. And that was a huge crisis for capitalism, and they had to do fascism in the 30s, and, well, it started in the 20s also, to try to shore up the system and protect against proletarian revolution. The communist movement was still really on the upswing at that point. Obviously, that's not the case so much now, but we need to get that labor movement going again, because I think a lot of people have become really paralyzed and hopeless, and there's so much petty bourgeois despair, confusion, and shock. We need to snap the fuck out of it, because it's looking like that bubble is starting to pop again. I think we're going to go through something. Well, it's either going to be like 2008 or it's going to be like the Great Depression, crash of 1929, maybe both with new features, whatever. But what we see is, I think, reflected in the housing market, that, the five bubbles over the last 50 years, just getting bigger and bigger and bigger each time. The system, it's, I think, reflecting greater and greater growing instability. We're going to do some COVID stuff in a minute, but before we get to that, kind of a related health note. Oh, this was interesting. This is out of Indiana University. AI voice analysis offers insights into depression among CEOs. This system is bad for everyone. So, I mean, how much sympathy we're giving these people is not really the point, but that they are also miserable running the system is something which may be an exploitable point at some point for a skilled propagandist and agitator. So think about that. Mental health issues among those in top management are often concealed due to stigma and concerns about professional reputation, which often results in undertreatment. So you got a bunch of, very mentally ill people running the companies. They're completely miserable. How does that affect how they're governing the company? And I don't mean in terms of profitability. I mean, how they're treating people, and, to what extent is this a factor getting in the way of, is it contributing to them being harsher in terms of managing the people at the company? So anyway, Research from the Indiana University Kelley School of Business used a new means of assessment to gain insight into depression among chief executives. So take it for what it's worth. It did use AI, but the study applies artificial intelligence to analyze vocal acoustic features, subtle markers that are imperceptible to the human ear from CEO's speech. By leveraging machine learning models trained on clinically validated depression indicators, researchers examined more than 14,600 earnings call recordings from S&P 500 firms from 2010 to 2021. The findings revealed that in over 9,500 instances, CEOs exhibited vocal markers consistent with depression. Our study, then this is a quote from one of the researchers, our study provides an initial examination of CEO depression, something that often remains hidden due to the high-pressure nature of the role these people play at their companies, said Nargis Gulshan, assistant professor of accounting at the Kelley School. Given their pivotal role as decision-makers, CEOs' emotional states can significantly impact their careers, firms, and the broader economy. The demanding nature of their job, with long hours, high stress, and crucial decision-making, increases their risk of depression. The paper is titled Silent Suffering, Using Machine Learning to Measure CEO Depression, and it appears in the Journal of Accounting Research. Gulshan and her co-author, Mark Cheng, a doctoral candidate at the University of Kentucky, explored the prevalence and severity of CEO depression and its links to job-related stressors. Their findings reveal that greater firm risk correlates with higher depression levels, something you'd probably expect to find, while higher job demands are associated with lower depression rates. The study also found that female and older CEOs were less likely to show signs of depression. Previous research has found that the same brain regions that involve depression are also associated with decision-making. People who are depressed are more sensitive to losses and negative feedback, while being less sensitive to positive feedback and rewards. Gulshan and her co-author also investigated how depression is associated with CEOs' career outcomes. While they found no evidence that CEO depression was associated with CEO turnover, they did find that turnover performance sensitivity was higher among depressed CEOs. The researchers also examined how CEO depression is related to compensation and incentives. Their findings suggest that CEOs with higher levels of depression tend to receive larger compensation packages, and more of their compensation is linked to performance. Collectively, these findings suggest that CEOs with depression have a heightened responsiveness to negative feedback and a diminished sensitivity to positive feedback. So the bad stuff hits them harder, the good stuff doesn't barely make a blip on how they're feeling. Gulshan and Chung also examined the relationship between CEO depression and firm performance, which included current and future returns on assets, operating cash flows, sales growth, and stock returns. They found no evidence that CEO depression explains firm performance, either in the short or long term. Quote, considering the widespread nature of depression among executives, additional studies are needed to understand contributing factors, how depression affects business decisions, and strategies for managing depression in leadership roles, Gulshan said. She said her model should not be seen as a diagnostic tool, but as a means of shedding light on an important issue that has long been hidden in executive circles. I think that's an important point. It's not to, suddenly start subjecting people to, kind of an acoustic polygraph, so to speak, to get into their emotional state. And it's like, are you happy enough to continue this job, or should we remove you? It's that rich people in general, tend to be less accountable to family problems, to mental health issues, whereas people in lower socioeconomic brackets tend to be more policed for these things and, pushed into situation, maybe not 100% against their will, but receiving more coercive treatment, whereas people at the upper ends tend to have more privilege in terms of deciding for themselves, whether their mental health is adequate or not. And so it is hidden. So they went at it, understanding it's hidden, somewhat sneakily. They just were like, all right, we have trained a machine to recognize, to the extent that this is valid, and there's some validity to it. They mentioned they didn't go into specifically what the clinical validation was, but they mentioned there's some validity to this method. They ran almost 15,000 earnings calls through this machine. They're like, yeah, the CEOs sound depressed. They have vocal markers associated with depression. And, So where do we go from here? Even the people kind of at the top of the system are depressed. How is that impacting their outlook on society? How is that impacting their politics? How is that impacting the dehumanization of people below them in society, people they have power over? And anyway, these were all questions I would want to follow up with, but I thought that was an interesting one. So let's go into chat for a minute before we do anything else. All right. Where were we? Still got 85 people in here. I want to, again, thank all the regulars. Sorry we're not getting as much time to chat as usual because I'm making sure to not get overly bogged down in the chat. Well, I mean, we did all chat really for the last couple of streams. So, but it's good to see the regulars here, and it's also nice to see a lot of new people. I mean, the channel's grown enormously. We're at over 32,000 now. Subscribers on the YouTube and branching out into Substack and everywhere else. So I know there's people coming to the stream from all over the place. We're getting into the more specifically communist stuff at the end of the stream, so do stick around for that. We're probably not going to hit it for another hour. But yeah, hopefully you're enjoying yourselves here. Frazier versus Cupp, 1969 United States Supreme Court case allows pigs to lie during an investigation and interview. However, if you lie, they can bring felonies on you. Yeah, so that's a question of does lying to police automatically constitute an obstruction of justice charge or not? My understanding is it does with federal investigators. So if you lie to the FBI, that's automatically a crime. It isn't always with other agencies, non-federal, but yeah, that would be something you'd want to not get information from me about before acting on it. But yeah, police are definitely allowed to lie to you. You should definitely be aware of that. And this is Thursday, but regularly on social media there is "Shut the fuck up Friday." When police are around, do not talk. Do not talk. Don't say anything beyond maybe if you're required to identify yourself in certain situations. Otherwise, don't say a fucking word. By the way, the immigration crackdown resistance stuff works. Trump's border czar was actually complaining about it when they rolled out the raids a few weeks ago. Yeah, it works. Resist. This is true of the Holocaust as well. The people who resisted were more likely to survive. So resist, absolutely. And having other people around you, networks of people resisting, even better odds. It's extremely scary. It's like we're somewhere between Nazi Germany and Tsarist Russia right now. The resistance to it is also getting heated, though. I think that Trump is coming out swinging because he's trying to catch people off guard. Everybody knows the liberals go to sleep during Democratic presidencies. And that's what happened. And so this is, a rude awakening of the actual country we're actually in and what its politics are. What is Trump going to do next? Deport Cubans, people that have been used for propaganda ever since the revolution? And they'll keep finding people to scapegoat. I don't know, but they'll come up with something. Yeah, too many people genuinely believe hashtag general strike is how a general strike happens. They think a Facebook post is enough. No, widespread community organizing, to a level that would utterly transform the society. Think of it this way. When you see a mushroom appearing on the ground or coming out of a tree, what you're seeing is actually the fruiting body. What exists under the surface, whether it's in the tree trunk or whether it's in the ground, in the soil, is the actual body of the mushroom organism. It's a mycelial mass. It's just undifferentiated, fungal tissue. The mushroom you see is the tip of the iceberg. That's just the fruiting body that it extends once in a while to reproduce. A general strike is kind of the same way. You're going to have a gigantic mycelial mass, which doesn't currently exist in sufficient form, before you can, really achieve that popping up of an impressive wave of fruiting bodies being, a public demonstration. Public demonstration is an expression of a larger movement and community ties and organizing, which has already happened previously and is already in existence. And then the demonstration is an expression of that community. But you have to establish that community in order to do that. It's kind of like, trying to put on a play of people who just showed up yesterday. Nobody knows their parts. Nobody knows what the chemistry is between the people. Nobody knows their cues. Nobody has the costumes yet. It's like there's so much, setup work and getting to know everybody's parts in pulling this thing off. And you got to rehearse it, and you got to, build up to it. And that's really key. I think people have kind of, like I was talking about, become afraid of each other and forgotten how to talk to other people. Got to bring it back. Plus, you just have a happier life that way. I mean, U.S. society is very unhappy. The people here, don't do well consistently in surveys about happiness. I think a lot of that is political disempowerment. It's feeling like we can't keep up with expenses, but it's also, constantly having things rubbed in our faces about, a bourgeois lifestyle that's pushed through the TV that we can't afford. And it's also just not having community. And part of it is, the constant effect of right-wing radio and other media being divisive and, poisoning people against each other and creating intolerance. That has to be accounted for and pushed back against and overcome. But they're dumping billions of dollars, all constantly into right-wing media to keep people hating each other. I mean, in the Bush and Cheney years, it was this big fear. It was be afraid there's a Muslim terrorist behind every corner. And you keep people afraid for long enough, it's really easy to turn that into hate. And I mean, there's like an old Oliver Stone movie about called Talk Radio, about the right-wing hate radio in the 80s, like late 80s. Rush Limbaugh, all that shit. Bill O'Reilly, you listen to that stuff. I mean, I've seen it in like relatives where, older people used to be perfectly pleasant. And then in the 2000s, listening to a few years of like Fox News, they became like, probably expecting them to bust out a Sieg Heil at some point. That's undermining community tremendously, and it has to be combated head on. I was talking about the video I'd like to do catching up with what's going on with the Trump administration. I feel like I have to finally do that critical thinking about the media, media literacy and critical thinking about society video first, because I don't know, it's so much to keep up with. But anyway, continuing with the chat. Have you seen the recent U.S. attempts at aligning with Russia against China, similar to the 70s when they aligned with Maoist revisionist China to fight the USSR? Not really. So you're saying like that's what the Republican Party is trying to do, is they're trying to align with Putin against China. I have not heard anyone say that, nor did that particularly occur to me. It seems like Russia and China have a stronger bond than the U.S.-Russia would really hope to develop, but I'll file that one away. I haven't seen that, no. Remember when Musk experienced 10% booing at the Dave Chappelle thing? Yes, I absolutely do remember that. Chappelle was like, look, it's the world's richest man. Yeah, people don't actually like him so much. I do remember that. There was an interview with, I watched probably 4 or 5 hours of like Elon Musk hate videos recently. There was a thing where he was, I think, on Fox News, and the interviewer asked him, how are you able to run your companies while doing all this Doge shit that you're doing? And he's like, with great difficulty. And he looked like he was about to like burst in tears. I mean, the guy is not doing well. He had a actually kind of tragic upbringing. His dad is a complete piece of shit, in my opinion. He used to like beat Elon's mother in front of him, and Elon was like 8 years old, and he'd be like pounding at the back of his dad's legs to like get him to stop. And I mean, that's like actually horrible. But then he grew up to be a perpetrator himself. and that's where the sympathy ends. But I mean, he's a deeply, deeply psychologically damaged person, and it would not shock me if he wound up being his own end, which normally not a thing we would encourage, although would make an exception in that case. But I mean, people were taking shots at Trump like more than once. It's getting into the territory where I think finally the American public is no longer prepared to accept too much more. Even a lot of people who voted for Trump did not think that they were getting Musk as part of the package as like co-president. So that's even, if you look up town halls, there's a lot of town halls with Republican congressmen and whatever. People are fucking pissed. And so I think that this is, they have bit off more than they can chew with Musk, and I think he is actually finally taking it past the limit of what the U.S. public will accept. And, you know, there's both positive news in that. We finally hit the limit, but also the bad news is the limit was like super extreme, and we should have hit the limit like 30 years ago. So, yeah, actually, that's what I was just saying. All I'm saying is I just watched Elon whining on Fox about people wanting him dead. He looked like he was on the verge of tears. Absolutely. Yeah, he needs praise, and people, his Twitter team thought that he locked himself in an office at one point a few months into buying Twitter, and they thought he was going to harm himself. The guy is not well. I mean, look at that thing where he had the sunglasses and the chainsaw at CPAC. He is not okay, and not a stable person at all. Rich people are in no way better than us. They have no taste. They're complete. Well, some of them have taste, but money does not buy taste. Let's say that. They're completely out of touch, and the people who they pay to seem human are out of touch as well. Alienation is a bitch. At least they can afford good pharmaceuticals, which now I realize is the reason we can't. I don't know if the article is meant to make people feel bad for CEOs. I didn't get that out of it at all. What I took it as is that we never talk about the mental health of the rich. We never talk about the fact they might be fucking crazy. Like we never talk about, like I said, we experience a lot of policing and a lot of coercion with regard to lower class mental health. That is definitely, it can be helpful to people. The things about psychology and therapy that are genuinely healing and beneficial and therapeutic, but there definitely can be a coercive element to it. And that is something that has been weaponized to a certain extent against the working class in certain contexts. But the rich are able to avoid that. You look at, you know, a lot of the trouble that, what did they used to call it? What did they call it? That thing in the 90s and 2000s when rich kids acted out. God, I can't think of the name. I haven't thought about this in 20 years. Oh, I was so close to getting it. This is like one of those scrunch up your face and make a noise like, what is the thing? It'll come to me 5 minutes from now. I'll just randomly blurt it out. But, I almost had it. Affluenza. Yeah. But yeah, the rich people are never subjected to scrutiny with regard to their mental health. That's why I brought it up, is not about sympathy. It's about, are the rich okay? I mean, maybe we should, go in there and take a look, because it seems like the way they're running society seems to, indicate that they're not. That was more how I took it. Brian Thompson's cohorts walking over his still warm dead body as they go over to their Q3 financial reports. The system isn't even good for the capitalists themselves. I mean, yeah, it gets them a lot of money, but there's a huge amount of conformity that you're required to undergo to exist at that tier. You're considered suspicious if you're not acting like the biggest fucking douchebag who ever lived, more or less. It's a very limited, what you're allowed to do, what kind of person you're allowed to be as a CEO. Not that I think that that's gonna, We don't just need like personal liberation for CEOs. We went through things like that already in different phases of society. Now we just need to bring the system down. But yeah, it isn't good, and I think that the people who still haven't gotten the memo, or who are still comfortable with maintaining a system with that much, conformism in it, that demands that much lack of individuality from people. I think if they haven't gotten it by now and they haven't had a yearning for something more, they probably never will. I'm glad I got out of the crypto scam when I did. They're all nuts. Not much to add. Actually, what was funny, Trump in 2019 had a tweet about, and like some interviews about Bitcoin. He's like, I think Bitcoin is terrible. It's like a scam. It devalues US currency. It's not like a stable asset. People who want to make America great should invest in US currency, not fucking Bitcoin. True. I mean, that's accurate. And, but actually now he has like done a full about face, and he seems to just be like saying whatever message people like pay him to say at this point. Trump seems to just not give a fuck anymore. I think it's a markedly different tone personally. NVIDIA will also grow until the whole AI gold rush is over. They will sell shovels to everyone. In 2024 and this year, they made higher quarterly profit than the whole year of 2022 and years before that. Yeah, I mean, they will get while the getting's good, absolutely. DeepSeek has shown, I mean, you can run DeepSeek on those chips, but you don't need those chips to do it, and you can do it offline, and that's just the beginning of open source models that don't require the expensive NVIDIA chips, and that will be, when that starts to fizzle out, you know that time is up for the stock bubble. USA will always find a war. The military corporations are down thanks to Trump. I'm pondering selling my soul and investing in Lockheed so I can afford more potatoes. Don't do it. Don't do it. I mean, you're probably financing your own death at some point by doing that. But what about the super profits? Yeah. I mean, that's what it's going to come down to, and we have to be ready to demonstrate and be really willing to fuck shit up the next time that comes up. The aircraft manufacturing industry is even worse. Boeing and Airbus are producing most of the airframes. Boeing has massive quality control problems, and Airbus can't deliver orders on time. Yeah, what is even going on with Boeing? I haven't seen that in a while, but it was like they had just stuff was falling off of their planes in midair. In Chicago, interviews for the CTA bus driver are being conducted by AI. This year, AI is set to beat humans in competitive coding for the first time. It's never going back. They say in 5 years, 95% of all code will be written by AI. And that's how the Matrix gets built. Sorry you missed the notification. Got 95 viewers in here. Welcome to all the first timers, as well as other people returning for live stream 126 here. The most depressing shit is watching the YouTube channels Modern MBA and How Money Works when they talk constantly about how bad capitalism is and still not reaching the conclusion that capitalism is bad. I hear you. I mean, we did a response to that Eurodollar University guy, and his whole thing was like, well, at least we beat communism. Every day, this guy makes a video of like the doom and gloom that is around the corner. And it's just like, but you still think this is the best system that there is. Is it possible we could move beyond this? I completely hear you. It's like they just embraced it. It's like life should be bad. Actually, life should be bad for most people most of the time. That seems to be people who consciously embrace capitalism like their philosophy. I reject that. I think people should mostly have dignified lives with we have all this technology. We should be meeting people's basic needs, have a very high bar for the basic comfort level. Okay, way back in high school, I mentioned to a friend whose family had money, and I was like, I've been reading like some communist stuff, and I think I'm a communist. It makes sense. And he's like, communist? Don't they want everybody to? He was rich. He had like a BMW. His parents bought him when he got his driver's license. And he's like, don't they want everybody to like drive Hyundais? I'm just like, I've thought about that conversation so many times since then. I'm like, do you understand most people in the world, like if they get a bicycle, that's like a big step up. Do you understand most people are like never ever gonna drive a car in their lives? Like out of the billions of people on this planet, that's not like a thing a lot of people do. And like you're worried that everybody might, be forced to drive a Hyundai. It's so wild. Like, it's such stupid thoughts. Really disregard things that the rich say. Do you ever watch the EPB Research YouTube channel? Yes, I'm familiar with that. It seems like solid economics to me, but I don't know. The last video was talking about the manufacturing sector being the indicator for a recession due to it being prone to not springing back. Yes, I actually do know that channel, and so they do a lot of research on the business cycle, the boom and bust cycle, or in other words, the crisis of overproduction that capitalism gets into, every 7 to 10 years. And they're doing a series of videos right now on leading indicators, and like basically time delayed indicators of a recession. So they try to, as being a channel oriented towards investing money and making, sound investments and not losing money, they have broken down the business cycle into like very early indicators, leading indicators, current indicators, then lagging indicators. So that's their video series. And so you have things like the bond yield curve and things like that. It inverting is like a very leading early indicator of a recession coming up. And then other sectors of the economy like manufacturing going down and transportation going down being like a closer leading indicator and so on. So yeah, I mean, I was thinking of doing a little bit more with that, maybe some analysis, but yeah, I mean, again, those videos they're always geared toward making money. I mean, they're made for investors, and rare is it that you find any criticism of this is a bad system. Kind of like, we're just talking about in that other comment. So I think that that's what needs to happen, and that's what I'm trying to do more of, is take a lot of that finance stuff and be like, so you have a system that keeps crashing and it's actually getting more unstable with time. We actually have to think about at some point we won't be able to do this system anymore. And when you can convince more people from the ruling class that the system cannot go on in its present form, that's a good thing. So, the more ways that we can say that, the better. Does this overextension of debt, I think, have anything to do with AI? The capabilities of these technologies are getting really crazy. I don't think it's too speculative to say AI will make massive disruptions within Trump's term. Y2K, but worse. Yeah, I mean, as I was mentioning, I think it probably is similar to the dot-com bubble, where you have this computing technology which people are investing money in blindly, willy-nilly, like anything related to AI, whether or not there's a solid business plan for making any money with. Like, if you look at OpenAI's business plans for like how they're going to make the money back, how they're going to pay back all these investors who dumped huge, just absolute unfathomable sums of money into this technology, they're going to charge people $200 a month to use it. Is there a precedent for that? Nobody's going to pay that. Nobody is going to fucking pay that. Like, maybe a few like niche like programmers or something might use that, but it's not like going to be a house. Oh, honey, did you pay the OpenAI $200 or $250 monthly fee this month? No one's going to do that. But that's also, if you look at Elon Musk's predictions of how Tesla and Grok are going to make money, he's saying, and the robotics, it's going to be robotics. There's going to be 2 robots for every human, and everybody's going to want one, and everybody's going to need to have 2 robots. This is an actual thing Elon Musk said. Now, what do you think, listening to this stream? The odds are, do you want a robot? I haven't met a single fucking person alive who wants a robot. Most people think robots are creepy. That's why there's so many horror movies about them. Robots are scary. Robots built by Elon Musk are even scarier. And what do you think the odds that that kind of demand? But this is like Elon Musk's hallmark. Well, I said he was a scammer. He's like one of those guys at the, yes, this is the Best Buy Geek Squad. There's a problem with your account. We need you to wire us $5,000. Please send it in, untrackable Walmart gift cards to this address. He's a scammer. He's been doing this his whole fucking career. There's like montages of him talking about Tesla's full driving capabilities. You know when that's coming? You know when Tesla's going to get full self-driving? Next year. He's been saying next year since 2016. 2016, oh yeah, we should have that by next year. And then he's also on record saying in the last couple of years that full self-driving is the difference between Tesla being worth what it's worth now and basically being worth zero, being worthless. And I think that there's going to be a time in the next 5 years where Elon Musk, good chance anyway, that the name Elon Musk will be synonymous with worthless asshole, because he has built his career on, he made a bunch of money up front, and then he comes in and takes over companies, tries to take all the credit for it, and then runs them really, really badly. And, it's like the Twitter thing. He tried to back out of buying Twitter. Twitter's now estimated at being worth like a tiny fraction of what it was worth, even when he bought it, when it was kind of struggling. It had huge social value, like it was widely used and it was important, but it was smaller than Pinterest in terms of the amount of users of Twitter. But it was highly influential, and people on the news would somebody tweeted this today. It was like a major, major communication vehicle. And then he bought it, and he fucking tanked it. He has like run it into the fucking ground. It is a cesspool now. The only Twitter account that I'll plug at all anymore is ACP_leaks. If you're still on Twitter, which I wouldn't recommend, check it out. ACP_leaks. He's running it into the ground. It's red pill central. It's misinformation and bots, top to bottom. Terrible, terrible, terrible website to use. I thought even before Musk took it over, it was like pretty stressful using Twitter, but you could also find some real diehard people, just information junkies who were just lived for it and took the hit to their to their psyche and developed that personality disorder, but like powered through and really fucking got to the beating heart of, the nerve center of social life in the US and in the world. Under Musk, it's people are fleeing in droves. So that's his typical thing. And with Tesla, it's like full self-driving next year. We were supposed to have the cyber cabs, the cyber taxis. Well, the Cybertrucks are literally falling apart, so unlikely. There was another thing about, so the number 2 country that buys Teslas is China. China just has a ton of people. So after the US, they're the number 2 country. In Europe, they're tanking. Tesla sales this year are a quarter of what they were a year ago. That's bad. BYD is taking over. But in China, also people are not put off by Elon Musk's politics for whatever reason, whether it just doesn't resonate with them or what. You'd maybe expect them to be more class conscious, being that it is ostensibly a socialist society. But anyway, Elon Musk's Sieg Heils have not turned off the Chinese EV consumer so much. But their self-driving doesn't work in China. And so the tickets are automated in China. So like if you drive, there's cameras and it just, like traffic cams, and it just sends you a ticket. And so there's like a video of a guy who took his Tesla out for a spin and it did self-driving, and he got 5 tickets by the time he got back home. And he's like, yeah, this isn't working. Because it doesn't work in the Chinese road system. They didn't program in the rules correctly. It's so basic fails. But that's Elon Musk, man. The guy, he could have just made a lot of money, gotten out of therapy, not become a fucking fascist. But no, instead of going to therapy, men will do this. And that's what we get. And now they're slashing the fucking government. Anyway. I forget what the question was. Hopefully that was interesting, though. I recently finished reading R. Palm Dutt's Fascism and Social Revolution a few days ago, specifically the 2nd edition, before changes were made to it that were in accordance with the erroneous Popular Front strategy. Yes, so that was something when I was reading it. I was reading the third edition. There's a couple of things noticed or were pointed out to me that were in the third edition that weren't in the second edition. Uh, on the whole, I think it still holds up. But anyway, of the Seventh World Congress of the Comintern, that was Dimitrovism, is what we're talking about as far as those errors. I don't think many people realize just how important that book is, especially with the recent fascistic tendency of the U.S. PATSOCs or Nazbols or ACP, whatever they're calling themselves now, the LaRouchites under different names. It's a hugely important book. I've had it pinned as the book for returning subscribers to the channel for a while and labeled it best anti-fascist book ever. Glad that you're enjoying it. And yeah, there are slight differences between the second and the third edition. I did read the third edition. So arguably the second one's like a hair better, but still really good. I think last comment before we get back to some articles. Situation ain't as dire in the UK as in the US right now, but we need to be prepared. Not sure how much you know about the Green Party here, but it's the closest thing we have to a significant national Soc Dem party, although it has some reactionary elements. Do you think it can serve as a mass party in the same way you feel about the US Greens? The UK Labour Party is fully right-wing or neoliberal now. Almost all social democratic elements have been purged from the UK Labour Party. So not living and not ever having lived in the UK, I am reluctant to I definitely want to caveat that up front. You tell me. I mean, I think it's worth a shot. I think what would be valuable would be for groups of communists to get involved with that party because there's no prohibition on doing that. I'm not talking about... Okay, so this is another thing that just absolutely pisses me off. The ignorance when people talk about, oh, you're advocating entryism. No, I'm fucking not. And please don't use words you don't know the meaning of. Entryism is like basically when one organization or party attempts a hostile takeover another. And so Trotskyite groups would do this, particularly during the Comintern days, because being Trotskyites, they were barred from the Comintern. And so, they did make their own Fourth International eventually. But in the meantime, in order to have some kind of mass organizing, they would mass enter non-communist labor parties with the hope of taking them over. That is entryism. It's a hostile organization of one organization or group or party by another. It's a mass entering in an organized way to try to take it over. I've actually seen this in real life. Saw a Trotskyist group doing this, and it's fucking obnoxious. When I'm talking to an unorganized, communist, curious audience, as we've got here listening to the channel, and welcome, I'm really glad that you are here and taking part in this. And people say to me, hey, I'm not currently organized with any group or party. What should I do? And I say, well, there's going to be DSA and or the Green Party in your area. You can start with those. Oh, that's entryism. No, it's not fucking entryism. It's telling people to just get started with organizing. If I said CPUSA should mass enter DSA and try to take it over, that's entryism. Okay? Do you see the difference? Fuck. Anyway, what you could do is with different groups or a network of communists, get involved with the Green Party and conduct an assessment and then share it with other communists and say, is this a vehicle? What are the strengths and weaknesses? What is the current state of the Green Party in the UK? What are causes for hope? What are causes for concern? And what could, very class conscious individuals be looking for in getting involved with a party like that and trying to use it to the most useful possibilities that it can offer. We're living in a time where confidence in socialism is quite low, or Marxism-Leninism at least, is quite low. And, a lot of people just have been told it's quote-unquote state capitalism, not really understanding what that means. And they've written it off, and like that the USSR was, worse than Nazi Germany, etc. That's the point we're starting from. How do we get from there to doing something really useful? So what I'm saying is, you tell me. I don't know enough about the UK Green Party. The last thing I heard, I mean, like, we've seen Green parties, which are not. It's not the same Green Party in the U.S. as is in Germany, as is in Australia, as is in the UK. They're all separate parties that share a name. So, like, the German Green Party is famous now for doing a right wing turn. And there's actually a really good recent Bestie Marx video, BES space D period space Marx. I link actually to Bestie Marx off of the S4A YouTube channel. If you scroll all the way down on the home tab to related channels. Side note, still annoyed at YouTube for getting rid of the community tab. I mean, does YouTube not want channels recommending other channels that their audience might like? It's so bizarre to me that they got rid of, or it's not the community tab. What was it? It was the channels tab. That's what it was, channels tab, where you could just recommend other channels to your audience. Fuck. I mean, that's good for YouTube. I don't know why they got rid of that. Anyway, you can still find it all the way at the bottom of the home tab. Bestie Marx covered this as far as the anti-Palestinian stuff that's going on and the pro-Zionist stuff that's going on in the German political parties, including the Green Party, and how, I think it was in their AFD video, that's what it was, that they turned, they were like having way too much commonality with the AFD. So Green parties in general can go horribly wrong. It's going to depend on the particular situation in that country and the particular course of the development of politics and what other parties exist and what are the laws and all kinds of other things. So you tell me. I mean, get some communists in there, conduct an analysis of the UK Green Party. If Labour is out, you gotta still do something. So see what you can do. Let us know. You know, that's what I always say is, like, you know, you tell me. I don't have like an inside track on that otherwise. Yeah. So anyway, that was that question. That's actually a very good, provides a good segue, I think, into something I was going to do on DSA. Let me just take a real quick break, and I'll be back in like 1 minute. So we were just talking about the UK Green Party, and somebody was asking, and the answer was, I don't know, about, is that a suitable vehicle for some organizing? But that reminded me of somebody, a patron, sent in this to talk about a Marxist-Leninist caucus within DSA in the U.S. So let's take a look at that. It is called Red Star. And so this is the Red Star caucus within DSA. And we're going to read the points of unity. So this is our points of unity, a statement of the shared politics of Red Star, a Marxist-Leninist caucus in DSA. What is Red Star? Red Star is a Marxist-Leninist caucus in DSA. Our primary goal, the goal which informs all of our organizing work, is to abolish capitalism and ultimately to achieve communism. We do not believe that capitalism can be reformed into socialism. It must be overthrown and replaced. Red Star conceives of itself as an ideological center in DSA. As a center, we work from a practical and coherent position to push DSA toward our shared vision through organizing, through developing ourselves and other DSA members, through polemics, and by engaging with DSA's internal democratic processes. And I really want to comment here. A lot of people growing up in a country like the US have never really had much experience. Maybe you got lucky with your family being fair and democratic about family decisions. Maybe you didn't. But or maybe you were, I don't know, in a band. Maybe you were on a sports team that was like fair or something. Anyway, people have limited experience with democratic organizations. It can be a profoundly healing experience, honestly. But when you get involved with left-wing politics and you get involved in organizations, what you think actually matters. And for people who haven't experienced that, it can be almost hard to believe. But it's true. DSA does have internal democracy. The Democratic Party does not. But these other groups, like you get involved with a Green Party or a DSA or the various other groups on the left, these are about democracy. And you get involved with it and you're able to vote on stuff, and it actually feels great. that you see your ideas going into what the group is actually doing. And it's a shared thing and you're building it as a group. And it's great. But, you got to actually identify groups where, real ideological struggle and democracy can happen and where it can't. Democratic Party, not a vehicle for ideological struggle because it's completely dominated by imperialist politics. Something like DSA, it has its right wing, which hugs up against the Democratic Party and is opportunist, but it has other, its left wing and caucuses like this, which are much more militant and hold the line for real socialism. So, there's different things going on. This is why we do these assessments and have people report back about their organizing efforts. But anyway, yes, there is some actual real internal democracy in DSA. Not every chapter is the same, but in general, yeah, people vote on stuff and what you actually think matters. So, continuing, Red Star seeks to cohere a vanguard party. We don't specify exactly how this party will emerge, but we believe DSA can foster its creation. DSA's resources, broad membership, organizing ethic, and robust democratic processes make it, out of all existing U.S. socialist organizations, the best incubator for such a party. Now, this is basically the same thing that I believe and why I've been saying to people, just get involved. I think something will come out of that. Even if at some point DSA keeps growing and then it splits between the left and the right wing, even the left wing of DSA, even if it was half of the organization, would still be the largest actually socialist organization in the country. And so even that would be, I'm not encouraging a split, by the way. I'm just saying, like, even if that were the case, you'd still have a huge socialist organization which could do a ton of stuff free from that, Democratic Party opportunism and so on. And I don't know exactly how it's going to happen either, because the labor movement is normally what you would see spawning socialist politicians and labor leaders coming out of that struggle. And yet that struggle is at a very low level. And so, the vanguard is the most class conscious portion of the working class. And when you have low amounts of class struggle, you get a weak vanguard. It's just how it is. Yes, book study and things like that can augment it, but the experience of being involved in various community and workplace struggles can really sharpen that class consciousness. And then when you go and read the history and theory, you go, oh, I know what they're talking about because I experienced that in my co-op or in my labor drive or in this ballot measure that we tried to get on to increase the minimum wage or whatever. And you saw the real estate developers come out to oppose something you were trying to do. Like, you see it then. And then you see the shitty politicians who suck up to them. Then you read the theory and you're like, oh, I know what they're talking about, what they were going through in this struggle in Germany, because, I experienced something with similar class dynamics here. So it's always that real world experience. It helps inform the history and the theory. But yeah, I agree. I don't know exactly how the U.S. left is going to get off of its ass and back on its feet. But I know that trying to stand up is part of that process. And so get out there, get doing it. I think something's going to come out of that. You're going to meet other people who are also in the left wing of DSA and fighting against the opportunists and voting against things about endorsing the Democratic Party. And something probably will cohere out of that. And then you'll figure out what the next step for you is. And I, a YouTube channel, am not here to dictate that to you, I'm here to help clue people in, to help you read the history and theory, connect with the international communist movement of the last 175 years, to learn those lessons so that you can actually help forge the future informed by all that. All right, anyway, so I wholeheartedly endorse this general philosophy. Next, we are Marxist-Leninists. We understand Marxism as a living, breathing theoretical framework, which is not and never can be a static set of dogmas. We see Marxism as the foundational and most informative lens through which to understand the workings of capitalism and take these to be its essential characteristics. 1, scientific socialism. 2, dialectical and historical materialism. And these are not numbered. I'm just making clear that this is a list. So in no particular order. 3, an understanding of imperialism. 4, a revolutionary horizon, that is a goal you're headed toward. 5, the role of the vanguard in organizing the revolution. It's not just going to happen spontaneously. And 6, the role of a party with a socialist and democratic character in cohering the vanguard, bringing that together and sharpening it. And then the vanguard is going to do its thing once it has, formed. But how do you even get these people together in the first place, right? So we operate as scientific socialists. We abide by the frameworks of dialectical and historical materialism and apply a scientific lens to our work. This means that we do not approach things solely from the perspective of virtue or principle, ideals. In the consideration of any issue or development of any idea, we give necessary consideration to the causal contradictions and historical specificity that has led to the development, context, and absolute nature of the question in consideration. We use these frameworks to make decisions about where and how we fight and use them to guide us to the most effective method to achieve our goals. We refuse to reflexively adopt or avoid any given tactic or strategy. Rather, we evaluate the immediate situation and flexibly apply tactics and strategies which will advance us towards our goal. It is not only important to us that we identify what can win in a given moment, but that we are willing to change when a strategy fails or ceases to be effective. For this reason, and because we aspire to learn from our own history, we view self-criticism as an essential practice. After all, the scientific method is centered on testing and refining hypotheses. We also advocate for DSA to further formalize this process because we believe self-criticism can help DSA to become more self-aware and thus a more effective organization. I think this is great, actually. Democracy is at our core. Red Star recognizes a relationship between democratic deliberation and scientific socialism, and we place special emphasis on applying a scientific lens to our deliberation and organizing work. We choose our campaigns and strategies by applying a rigorous, dialectical, historical, and materialist analysis to our conditions. We evaluate the outcomes of those campaigns and strategies using the same lens, both individually and collectively, through thought, debate, criticism, and deliberation. The results of that analysis go on to inform future decision-making. As such, Red Star acts in accordance with the following principles. All appointments, roles, and directing bodies of the caucus shall be created in accordance with Red Star's bylaws to ensure a democratic mandate. All decisions can be reconsidered by the general membership at any time. Caucus bodies shall give regular accounts of their activities to the caucus. Democracy is not when everybody gets to do whatever they want. It is when members of a group vote as equals to bind themselves collectively and make decisions in line with democratically agreed upon principles. So this is basically democratic centralism. Everybody is free to discuss, then you vote with the understanding that you're going to stick by the outcome of the vote, even if you voted against it. And, if it really was wrong, you can try again next time to get the correct outcome and lobby for that in the discussion, explaining why it was wrong and why it led to the undesirable outcomes. But this is in contrast to like an anarchist approach where, maybe everybody has to agree by like perfect consensus or 80% consensus up front. And then, people who disagree are free to like attack and not work toward the goal. And, you have to agree to abide by the outcome. Then, all decisions of higher bodies shall be absolutely binding on lower bodies and on all caucus members. The highest body is at all times the general membership of the caucus. Next, anti-imperialism must be at the core of the future party. As DSA is made up of citizens of the imperial core and sits as the largest socialist organization within it, we are in a unique position globally and must be mindful of the way that the U.S. sits as the hegemon at the very center of global imperialism and neocolonialism. As Marxists, we maintain a firm anti-chauvinistic and anti-U.S. imperialist line in every facet of our organizing. Red Star strives to weaken and ultimately dismantle U.S. empire. We acknowledge that while no political project is perfect, to publicly critique a government or movement that stands in opposition to the American government is to do the U.S. State Department's work for them, from Iran to Palestine. There is no such thing as a third camp. One is either working to support American imperialism or to oppose it. As we do not hold the reins of power over the U.S. military-industrial complex, all that can be done with public nuance around international political movements is to create consent for empire. We are mindful that facts don't exist in a vacuum. They are used to advance a narrative, and any narrative that forwards the interests of the American empire is one we shouldn't give oxygen to and is fundamentally for the imperialist camp. We are committed to opposing chauvinism in all its forms. The U.S. is rife with confusion about and derision for imperialism's targets, and there is no place for it in a socialist organization or movement. So I think that's generally good. Constructive criticism, it seems like that leaves no place for constructive criticism of anything outside the U.S. I understand the reasons for this. It seems to me like that might be a bit inflexible, but I understand where they're coming from and would be interested to see more how that plays out in practice. At the same time, though, I know that there is a major problem, with the Vosches and the like of, social chauvinism and having chauvinism for the U.S. while claiming to be an anti-imperialist, and that doesn't work at all. I guess the question is there absolutely no way to do constructive criticism of other, other things going on in the world? Or is that always going to 100% be used for imperialism? I think that that's not historically the position of like the Comintern. The position that I'm familiar with, the Leninist position, is that the reactionaries will always try to make hay out of communists criticizing each other, but that shouldn't stop us. So, a little criticism from me about that, but let's continue. Red Star does, however, engage in a robust internal critique of many international political projects. This isn't to decide which projects are good or bad, and therefore worthy of abstract support or scorn, but to learn scientifically from what others across the globe are doing, and to attempt to emulate winning strategies for enacting a proletarian dictatorship over capital in the U.S. Red Star and DSA hold close to no power, and until we do, the question of which other countries are worthy of our support is a distraction at best and chauvinism at worst. The opportunity to learn scientifically from projects abroad vastly eclipses any ground to be gained with the working class by engaging in nationalist, quote, nuance around actually existing socialist states and projects. So, again, I think danger of embracing revisionism here. There are many Marxist-Leninists I know who do not recognize any actually existing socialism. So at least they do engage in internal criticism of it. So that is something. Continuing, we must remember DSA is in its utter infancy in comparison to the majority of international projects and reject Western chauvinism from both the political powers that be and within our own ranks. We believe in the creative historical power of revolution. A capitalist society will not be reformed into a socialist one, just as capitalism itself was not born through welcomed reforms to the former feudal order. Popular legislation and politicians with benevolent intentions can help create more favorable conditions for change, but these things alone cannot bring the revolutionary overhaul we seek, a complete upheaval of the present economic system that extracts value from the many for the private profit of the few. Building for a revolutionary situation. DSA can support a revolutionary movement. Revolutionary situations are generated primarily by the intersection of two factors, by a sustained crisis in the system and an organization or organizations being capable of exploiting that crisis. These crises are continually generated by any inept governance that attempts to suppress class conflict and prop up an unsustainable capitalism or hegemony by force and includes economic crisis, climate change, and war. Agree. In 2020 alone, we experienced a triple crisis of a pandemic, a collapse in employment, and a nationwide uprising against police violence, and racism, which is definitely part of that. However, even in this acute moment of crisis, there was not a revolutionary situation. To knit these pain points and protest movements into something coherent is to form the party superstructure. Our goal is to build the skeleton of a democratic mass organization capable of sustaining and exploiting those situations in our favor. Red Star takes a three-scale approach to this strategy. These scales are the center, the smallest and most ideologically coherent of the three scales, the party, a broad democratic membership organization, and the class, all members of the working class and all oppressed peoples. The internal party dimension involves organizing to create democratic structures in DSA and allow for the growth of member organizing skills. The external class dimension entails the transformation of DSA to support movement struggles outside of its primary concerns, to expand the basis of its ability to represent the class. Red Star believes in DSA. There is no question that DSA is more effective than any other contemporary socialist organization at engaging the United States working class in substantive socialist struggle. But DSA has accomplished this in spite of its Harringtonite roots, not because of them. We're starting to push against the limits of what we can accomplish with its current organizational structure. And brief side note, Michael Harrington was one of the founders of DSA, and I read one of his books. This was like way back in the 60s. I mean, I didn't read in the 60s. It was written in the 60s. I'm trying to think of what the name of the book was. It was something poverty. And it was kind of coincided with LBJ's, like, the war on poverty. Turns out poverty won. But, yeah, it was definitely not having anything to do with Marxism-Leninism. But if you want some background on that, Michael Harrington wrote a few books. But while our horizon is revolutionary, our immediate task within DSA is building the party, the organization through which the working class can organize to fight the class war. At present, DSA does not meet our standards for a revolutionary party, agree, but it has potential. Besides being divided between incompatible visions for the organization, it's what I was saying about the different wings of DSA, like, oh, we can be a support arm for the Democrats and pull them left. Other people are like, we need to just move on from the fucking Democratic Party. Couldn't agree more. And I encourage anybody getting involved with DSA, as I have from the beginning, to, as soon as you get in, be on guard for that. And anytime anything related to the Democratic Party comes up for a vote against it, by all means. We need class independence, and the Democratic Party is class dependence, and class collaboration in a way that is not going to be helpful. DSA does not represent the entire working class, nor does it have the confidence of the entire working class. Because only the working class itself can decide who the party is, excellent point, there is no list of discrete steps for creating the party. We can, however, make DSA into an organization capable of fulfilling the historical role of an organization that empowers the U.S. left and working class to be capable of party formation. In other words, having Red Star make DSA into something that puts an option on the table for the working class to pick up and use. The collective organized activity of DSA member actors is the basis of the party. Michael Harrington likely didn't set out to create a party of professional reformists, but comments from a former staffer sympathetic to membership affirm Red Star's view that this is the modus operandi of the social democratic wing of the organization and their aligned staffers. Members are thought to be too unreliable and transient to do the political work of planning and directing strategic campaigns. This crucial political work should be left to paid staffers, while the vast majority of the membership are relegated to the grunt work of canvassing, phone banking, text banking, and bankrolling the organization through dues. This vision for DSA does not value members as thinkers, organizers, leaders, or decision makers. Red Star's view is that this organizational mode has been a failure. DSA hasn't persuaded non-socialist legislators to back our big-ticket reforms like Medicare for All, the Green New Deal, and the PRO Act, while losing the Bowman and Bush seats shows that there's no clear path to a socialist legislative supermajority. In the post-2016 era, DSA's strength and success has come primarily from the organizing work of its locals. DSA has flourished not as a vehicle for national reform campaigns, but as a laboratory where socialists have learned and grown through organizing experience and dialogue with each other. Exactly what I've been trying to encourage and we were talking about on this stream earlier. Our vision is that the most meaningful route forward from the professional reformist model is the full utilization of the membership. Couldn't agree more. DSA has no meaningful method to scientifically and rigorously test, advance, or coordinate the organizing skills of its members. It has no meaningful advancement aside from inviting a member to leave work for the concentration of authority in the mega chapter of DSA National. Developing the capability to effectively coordinate work across locals and utilize the collective skills of our membership is to unlock the ability to meaningfully fight for the class. The Vanguard Party is a superstructure, and this is the ending. To cohere from the whole class, DSA and the future party must have the ability to act as an effective superstructure for all political causes relevant to the class and be viewed as a practically beneficial place for the class to bring their issues and rally for support. So it's like anything else in society. When you need a tool, you go to the hardware store. When you need food, you go to the grocery store or a restaurant. when you need help with political organizing, you go to the DSA chapter. But it's not really established like that yet. And so it's got to be that. So it has to have the ability to act as an effective superstructure for all political causes relevant to the class and be viewed as a practically, as an in practice, day-to-day, I have a problem and I need somebody to help me with it, beneficial place for the class to bring their issues and rally for support. And so first it has to be built into that thing to be an option should the class so decide to use it. And then, the class hopefully comes around to the idea that that is a good thing for it to do and to use it. But it has to be built first. So in cases where rightist elements prevail in internal struggle, like leaning toward the Democratic Party, DSA is viewed as and acts semi-oppositional to more ideologically or practically advanced movements, deriding movements that have outpaced its development as ultra-left, insurrectionary, ineffective, or simply accusing them of being more marginal than they are. And let me just add to that, there's a constant underestimation of how much change the U.S. public wants and how badly we want it. Constant underestimation. I mean, even Bernie Sanders was to the right of most of the people, I would say, who were organizing for Bernie Sanders, or at least half. I mean, it was a substantial amount of people working for Bernie Sanders were far to the left of Bernie Sanders. So let's not underestimate that. Yes, we have to definitely establish that that is there before we, step off the cliff, if it in fact is a cliff, but I'm pretty sure it's not a cliff. We want to be sure before we do, some catastrophic, idiotic, some catastrophic failure, but let's, as a general principle, not underestimate how much, overestimate the conservativeness of the U.S. working class, because a lot of that has been kind of welded on top by right-wing media, and underneath the surface there are some better inclinations in there. Anyway, where were we? We work to make DSA a home for all kinds of liberatory political work, rather than an organization willing to cast aside a struggle that becomes too inconvenient a burden to hold alongside electoral minimum program work. To change DSA in this way is to create the opportunity for it to cohere a vanguard for the U.S. working class and draw the U.S. left into a sharper focus, a focus on the formation of a party as the only structure durable enough to carry out the protection of the class and its demands to the finish line. The party cannot be declared, it can only be built. And let me just say also, I'm not sure, and I don't want to get into my browser because I don't want the computer to crash while we're doing the stream, but I'm not sure if Red Star is doing a journal yet. But what they were talking about, I'm going to go back to the last screen. That was the end of the article, obviously. Where it's talking about here, it has no meaningful advancement aside from, it has no meaningful method to scientifically and rigorously test, advance, or coordinate the organizing skills of its members, and so on. It would be a great way to do that as a journal, and I would be more than thrilled to cover the contents of that journal and amplify it at S4A, because I have spent a lot of time thinking about how do we, again, get the U.S. left off of its ass and get it effective like literally never before, because we need it, even the peaks during the New Left or whatever, we need to bring it back to like something like the early days of the IWW or something. I mean, like a really empowered left that was willing to take chances and had confidence and could, trying to take control of the future. A journal would be a great way to do that and to reflect on the experiences of the different chapters and to strategize. So I would be all about that. Now, before we get into chat, and I definitely do want to chat about this, and we still have several other segments that I'd like to do today, and we will do. I want to read, there is a call to action from the Red Star Caucus about the upcoming DSA convention, which there's still plenty of time to join DSA, get involved with this, and then vote accordingly. For anybody listening to this in late March, I think this isn't coming up for several months, so get ready. This is titled Workers Need a Hammer. Workers need a hammer to smash the existing order of oppression and to forge the new world. Red Star statement on the 2024 elections. With the election called, we now know which faction of capital will be leading for the next 4 years. The Trump wing was able to secure victory against yet another historically unpopular Democrat, locking in the more brazen face of U.S. fascism for the cycle. Harris and her party promised genocide in Palestine and sanctions against half the world, along with militarized borders and capitalist-friendly economics at home. This platform, combined with her capitulation to racist and transphobic rhetoric, was unable to mobilize significant enthusiasm and resulted in Harris's defeat. This outcome was always in the cards. Socialism can beat fascism, but liberalism nurtures and abets it. By running on a platform almost indistinguishable from the Republicans, and by pointedly quashing any trace of left-wing policy, Harris announced that she'd rather ally with the right wing and abandon any pretense of appealing to the left. This strategy lost her the election and ratcheted U.S. party politics further to the right than they have been in recent memory. Trump and his movement are now back in control, better equipped to handle the machinery of state in service of their particular forms of oppression and exploitation. Bolstered by a wave of reaction that grew under Biden's failed return to normalcy administration, Trump is, which could you think of anything like more off than that? It's amazing. All right, just taking a moment to marvel at the staggering ineptitude of the Biden administration. Just right up to Biden going on, doing that national interview, begging and pleading that he's still capable of, cognitively capable of running for president. Terrible, terrible. Just like they were trying to lose, like throwing the election. Anyway, Trumpism represents a serious challenge to any movement that aims to better the conditions of the working class. Trump's re-election reinforces a pattern of neoliberal defeat across the global north. It is impossible to deny that reactionary forces are on the offensive and the left must rise to the occasion. Our tasks are unchanged. Trump represents the most straightforwardly hostile form of capitalism, but is ultimately just another of its loyal servants. DSA and the socialist movement in the U.S. need to channel collective outrage into building working class power to overturn our economic and political system. We must redouble our commitment to each other, strengthen ourselves as organizers and thinkers, and remain steadfast in our resolve to win socialism, even as fascism is on the rise. If you're in DSA already, come out to your chapter's next meeting. Chances are they'll have empowering work for you to do in your community. If you're not in DSA yet, join us. DSA has the potential to become a real instrument the working class can use, like a hammer, to develop, connect, and expand its struggles. It will take a united militant movement against oppression and exploitation, organizing on many fronts to put the working class on the offensive again. The powerful sense of solidarity that comes from standing side by side with comrades and fighting back will relieve the feelings of helplessness and rage. Very true. What this election result shows us, more than anything, is that liberalism has no tools to offer oppressed people within the United States and the world over in the face of mounting political economic crises. Liberalism, as the ideology of capitalism, imperialism, and the market, has shown itself time and again to be the tool of the oppressors. Attempts to bargain for a junior coalition seat at the table of capital have only led to co-optation and defeat, and we cannot wait forever. The working class has only itself and must free itself. To do this, we need our own party, our own ideology, our own tools. Workers need a hammer to smash the existing order of oppression and to forge the new world. I think there was one more screen here. And if you're interested in discussing this piece with other DSA members, head to the DSA discussion forum at discussion.dsausa.org, discussion.dsausa.org. The forums are open to all DSA members in good standing. If you haven't made an account, you can do so at optin.dsausa.org. If you're not a DSA member in good standing, sign up or renew your dues at act.dsausa.org/donate/membership. So we're going to, actually, before I go back to the chat, there's another brief thing that I do want to mention. People ask sometimes, like, why do you point people toward these kind of more mass-oriented things like DSA or the Green Party? And I would say probably DSA, well, they're just different things. And again, my feelings about the Green Party are the same. There's a lot of problems. There's a lot of weird, like, libertarian, contrarian, new agey things going on in the Green Party. There's also more serious eco-socialist things going on there. And if you want to check some of that out, I would recommend the New Horizons Green Party webzine. There's some articles I may read from that in future streams to talk about a more serious undercurrent of political science going on in the Green Party. And again, it's the same thing of like, there's party infrastructure there. For some reason, the working class isn't picking it up. And I think it's a lot of things. It's fear of defeat, lack of confidence, fear of taking a risk. There's a lot of things going on there. But I mean, there has been party infrastructure available for a while, but whatever it is not clicking with the U.S. public as like, you go on Blue Sky, for example, there's tons of people fed up with the Democratic Party. I don't know how many people are actually working on building something else, but that's a must. That's an imperative. You have to build something else. But anyway, people say, well, you're a communist. This whole channel is oriented towards educating people about the fundamentals of Marxism-Leninism and also, playlists on like anti-revisionist topics from throughout communist history. Why aren't you endorsing a communist party? I don't really see one that I think is just flatly endorsable. The larger ones are revisionist. And to me, if you're going to do liberalism, I'd rather just have you in a group that's not explicitly Marxist-Leninist, And like I said, there's several communist, there's the Marxist Unity Group, there's Red Star, there's like a number of different communist caucuses within DSA. I think for the purposes that we need right now, which is comrades networking with each other and forming study groups and caucuses and things like that, that's like a perfectly fine vehicle. Whereas like CPUSA has had misleadership, I think, for the longest time. Obviously, it's a sort of bellwether of where the communist movement is going in the U.S., but I also think that from what I've heard, organizing within that party is like not going that well. And then there are smaller anti-revisionist groups. You don't know which of these groups are still going to be around like a year from now. Like we've talked about the ACB before. They got like sued out of existence by NASBAL PCUSA. So, there's different groups here and there, or sometimes it's just one or two people and they take, they do some good anti-revisionist work and then take kind of a wacky turn that, I wouldn't endorse, after that sort of weird turn because it's not, again, that big of a group with kind of like stable opinions that they're building on over time. One thing I will show you, which goes along with the anti-chauvinist thread in the Red Star thing that we were just reading, is from the American Party of Labor, which is an anti-revisionist communist party in the U.S. In the Albanian mode rather than like a Marxist-Leninist Maoist mode. But this is an article, quick one, we'll just read quickly because along the same lines. To resist imperialism is to resist great power chauvinism. This is from the Red Phoenix, their newsletter. And so we start with a Lenin quote from On the National Pride of the Great Russians, 1914. Lenin talking about the subject. What a lot of talk, argument, and vociferation there is nowadays about nationality and the fatherland. And this was so the outset of World War I. So during times of war, the capitalists try to gin up as much jingoist nationalism, as much warmongering nationalism as they can possibly, engender in the population. So that was the context here. So Lenin is addressing that. Liberal and radical cabinet ministers in Britain, a host of quote-unquote forward-looking journalists in France who have proved in full agreement with their reactionary colleagues, and a swarm of official cadet, that was the main capitalist party emerging in Russia at that time, and progressive scribblers in Russia, including several Narodniks, populists, and Marxists, quote-unquote, all have effusive praise for the liberty and independence of their respective countries, the grandeur of the principle of national independence. And remember that Lenin's position was, in an inter-imperialist conflict such as World War I, you want the defeat of your own capitalist government so that a new social order can arise out of that defeat. So you want defeat all around. You don't want to be rooting for your, quote, fatherland. That was what they called defensism at the time, whereas Lenin's position was the defeat of one's own government in the imperialist war. So he was firmly against the kind of nationalism that the capitalists try to do in a war like this. So anyway, the grandeur of the principle of national independence. Here, one cannot tell where the venal eulogist of the butcher Nicholas Romanov or of the brutal oppressors of Negroes and Indians ends, and where the common Philistine begins, who from sheer stupidity or spinelessness drifts with the streams begins. Nor is that distinction important. So, whether somebody is just like a virulent racist, like what fascism didn't exist at that time yet, but like, somebody who's a fascist or somebody who just drifts along with the fascist current, New York Times comes to mind, etc. What's the distinction? You can't even tell once this machine of chauvinism starts up. Nor is that distinction important. We see before us an extensive and very deep ideological trend whose origins are closely interwoven with the interests of the landowners and the capitalists of the dominant nations. Scores and hundreds of millions are being spent every year for the propaganda of ideas advantageous to those classes. It is a pretty big mill race that takes its waters from all sources, from Menshikov, a chauvinist by conviction, to chauvinists for reasons of opportunism or spinelessness, such as Plekhanov and Maslov, Rubanovich and Smirnov, Kropotkin and Burtsev. So, Lenin giving a pretty thorough denunciation of trends which should be very, recognizable to us today. And here's the APL's statement. There has been, of late, a disturbing tendency in some circles calling themselves, quote, anti-imperialists, to couch their supposed opposition to imperialism using the rhetoric and iconography of imperialism itself. Individuals such as Caleb Maupin, for his when he was still a thing, have hailed American patriotism as, quote, progressive, even, quote, socialist, while groups such as the Party of Communists USA, PCUSA, just mentioning them, have issued statements commemorating the 4th of July using images such as the prisoners of war missing in action flag and a bayonet sporting M16 sticking out of ground with the helmet of supposedly dead American soldier covering the weapons stock. One is tempted to remind Mr. Maupin, and this goes to the A, quote, CP now, the Midwestern Mussolini, Midwestern Marx group. Some people thought that was their actual name, Midwestern. I got a comment like, why would anyone get involved with a group called Midwestern Mussolini? They call themselves Midwestern Marx Institute, but they're involved with the A, quote, CP, and Midwestern Mussolini, in our opinion, fits a little bit better, or a lot better. It's all been the same. I mean, there's people from the PCUSA involved in ACP now. That's the latest iteration and the highest form of organization that these, in my opinion, pieces of shit have managed to date. And boy, they're struggling. Again, on Twitter, ACP_leaks for another view of that group. Anyway, one is tempted to remind Mr. Maupin of what American patriotism has meant to the indigenous peoples of this continent and the PCUSA stalwarts, that their cherished Vietnam-era graphics came out of one of the most brutal imperialist, and I would add anti-communist wars of the past century. Like, mind-blowing, totally backward stuff. But such would be a waste of breath. What needs to be said loudly and clearly is that the language and optics of imperialism is just that, imperialist, and that the attempt to color anti-imperialism in shades of red, white, and blue is at best wrong-headed and at worst vicious hypocrisy, ignorant, hypocritical, and perhaps a cover for something far more sinister, which I think we're seeing emerge now. Namely, this is an attempt by elements hostile to the left and everything it stands for to infiltrate and usurp left spaces and progressive movements. Hear, hear. Bluntly stated, in the current age, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, progressive, liberatory, or revolutionary in the image of the American flag and the canon of reactionary, quote-unquote, Americanisms. Quite the contrary, an attempt to rescue the aesthetics of American imperialism in the name of some putative anti-imperialism is to spit on the past, present, and future struggles of oppressed and marginalized peoples, both at home and abroad. It is quite simply great power chauvinism. Dissecting what the motives and goals of these groups and individuals may be and dressing up their great power chauvinism in the garb of socialism and communism may be, while clear to anyone willing to take a closer look, there's a typo in there, is beyond the scope of this piece. Instead, let's focus on the very concept of a progressive Americanism and a patriotic socialism. Right from the first, a line of demarcation needs to be drawn between the nationalism of the oppressed and the nationalism of the oppressor. Nationalism itself began in the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic periods as a revolutionary force that championed the aspirations of a people a nation against the privileges and tyranny of hereditary aristocracy and divine right monarchy. And it was seen as a dangerous idea by the entrenched and embattled old regime for much of the 19th century, the age of the bourgeois revolution. For example, Marx and Engels writing about the revolutions of 1848 and the bourgeois revolutions sweeping Germany, later in the 1870s in Spain, and so on. However, by the end of that century, figures such as Bismarck co-opted nationalism and harnessed it to serve conservative and counter-revolutionary ends. Like, not that complicated, they figured out how to do that. Didn't take that long. Reactionary nationalism, or great power chauvinism, became a defining feature of the radical right of the 1890s and early 1900s. And the radical right was the forerunner of fascism, which inherited its nationalism, militarism, and ethnocentrism. The nationalism of the great powers has nothing in common with the original nationalism of the French and early 19th century revolutionaries, and absolutely nothing in common with the nationalism of oppressed and colonized peoples who are themselves struggling against that selfsame great power chauvinism, that a people whose history, culture, traditions, even their very language has been suppressed, seek to rediscover and revive what was taken from them is a revolutionary act. By the same token, the attempt to erase that history, culture, and tradition by imperial and colonizing powers and replace it with their own is the very definition of counter-revolution. That imperialism sought to disguise its rapine with claims of the civilizing mission and manifest destiny has long been unmasked and discredited. So much so that even imperialist apologists such as the proto-fascist Hilaire Belloc admitted the sham when he wrote, "Whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun, and they have not." That's from The Modern Traveler, 1898. And yet, here we see it again. One more page on this one. Within the American context, this is not entirely new. Earl Browder's Communism is 20th Century Americanism sought to accomplish much the same in the 1940s. And comment, in the Trotskyism Counter-Revolution in Disguise book, they mention also J. Lovestone. Lovestoneism was a kind of like Browderism before Browder. Lovestone went on to actually spy on European and South American labor unions for the CIA. But in the 20s, he was a Bukharinite and then a Trotskyite, and he did the same American exceptionalism thing, but he didn't achieve the same level of standing as Browder did, so is less known. But we'll cover, when we come back to Browderism, I think this summer, we'll do some stuff on Lovestone. But when we did the first leg of the Browder playlist, a lot of people were like, "This sounds like the Pat Sox," and it's exactly like a kind of neo-Browderism what they were doing. One of the hallmarks of Browderism was the attempt to retroactively tie the American national myth to the modern American communist movement. Browder sought to claim figures such as Washington and Jackson for, quote, socialism, asserting that there was something unique, something exceptional about American imperialism that distinguished it from the old European colonialism and contemporary imperialism, that it was a kinder, gentler, even progressive imperialism. Indeed, there was something different about U.S. imperialism, just not what Browderism claimed. What was different is that for much of its history up to 1900, U.S. imperialism, unlike the European powers, did not need to go overseas to seek colonies because its colonies were just a little further west. Westward expansion was imperial expansion. The American empire was within its own borders, as native peoples learned to their cost. It's worth noting that American imperialism began the search for investments, markets, and the export of capital at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th centuries, just at the time when the American Census Bureau and historian Frederick Jackson Turner declared that the, quote, frontier was closed. While in no way denying the historical advance of bourgeois liberal democracy over divine right monarchy and feudalism, or the significance of the American Revolution as a bourgeois revolution, the history of the United States is the history of imperialism. It is a history of genocide, plunder, racism, and exploitation. This cannot be denied, ignored, or covered over. To attempt as much, as the modern Browderites do, is the rankest, foulest reaction. To resist imperialism is to resist great power chauvinism. To challenge imperialism is to challenge the culture, symbols, emblems, and myths of the oppressor. To defeat imperialism is to uphold proletarian internationalism, the right of nations to self-determination, and to champion the cause of all oppressed, exploited, colonized, and marginalized peoples. This is the communist way. This is the only way. That was from Camilo Lazo, National Chair of the American Party of Labor, July 4, 2024. All right. So let's go back to the chat for a bit, and then still got some more segments to do and got gas in the tank to do them. So what do we got? 75 viewers. Give yourselves a round of applause. Everybody right now, round of applause for yourselves for being here. There you go. All right. 3 hours into the stream. We can't even trust Bernie? Joke. Nice. I'm looking for the chat. I'm looking for the beginning of the chat where we left off. Been turning that gross progressive fetish for telling people fuck around and find out. Back on the blue MAGA crowd. Kamala Harris fucked around and chose a deeply unpopular election platform. And now we're in the find out phase. It drives them completely nuts because it undermines their smug sense of moral superiority because they believe that they're the only ones who have a rightful claim over the FAFO fuck around and find out phrase. And you know what? That's just alienating to people. Like, going around and being like, we told you so. You are winning over literally no one. You're just being really fucking irritating, actually. You're not building any ties with people. You're just being obnoxious. It's obnoxious, okay? That's all it is, saying we told you so, and this and that. Like, no one is fucking happy that this happened. And, like, if you want to capitalize on people reconsidering their politics, then bring them over. Don't. But see, their whole orientation is like, it's just about Team Blue winning. They don't think any further than that. And anybody that like got in the way of that is just the enemy to be crushed. They don't even think, like, they're not capable of like building ties with anyone. They think that the sides are just set and it's just fixed. Nobody's going to ever change sides. Nobody's going to ever reconsider their politics. And they're just locked in this headbutting. And all they get is a really damaged and bruised head out of it, you know? It's just, it's so not persuasive. It's just deeply obnoxious. As long as Bernie doesn't come out as a libertarian Stalinist. There you go. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Bernie at this point, to say the least. And he is my good friend. And he is my good friend. That was the Bernie Sanders theme song for the 2020 election. Joe Biden, and he is my good friend. That he could not stop saying that. And he is my good friend. We know. We actually hate that about you. We hate that he is your good friend. Please stop saying it. So that was Bernie playing to the right. He's like, don't hate me. I like Joe Biden. He's my friend. They're not going to like you, Bernie. They're not going to like you. Ever. And we're liking you less for doing that. Oh, it's Vivek Ramaswamy's line that U.S. needs to align with Russia because the real enemy is China. Okay, interesting. Badmouth speaks in the most smarmy, condescending tone. It sounded like a cartoon character. I was like, is this really what he sounds like? Because I've heard snippets of him before, and I felt like it didn't come off that way to me. I felt like it was a Batman villain. It was very strange. I heard Red Star talk about the Russia against China as reverse Kissinger. Oh, somebody was asking me about that in the YouTube comments. Yeah, that Trump doing a reverse Kissinger. That's what he meant. Okay, now I get it. Have you heard of the Zapatistas? If so, what's your opinion on them? You know, somebody asked me to do, and I probably will. I've actually had it. I've had other priorities, but I've had it kind of on my list of readings to get to in the near future rather than the distant future. The Fourth World War has begun. If people want to start reading something from Zapatistas, that might be something to start with. But as somebody requested that, I will get to it at some point soon. I've just had like a lot of other stuff that's been a higher priority. Otherwise, we covered in a live stream a year or two ago that Zapatistas had folded up shop. Like, basically the cartels were taking over and they couldn't hold out. I don't know if anybody has more recent information, but that was the last I heard of the Zapatistas, that they were like kind of just folding for now. So no judgment. I mean, I don't know the situation that well, but that's what I heard. Considering Russia and China are both imperialist powers, they'll 100% come to be adversarial towards each other. The U.S. is probably hoping that it happens sooner rather than later. I mean, the deals that I saw, Russia really got itself into a hole with this war. And then China has been trying to exploit that deeply. China taking over like kind of a lot of Siberian territory in practice, not like governance wise, but like China definitely getting the upper hand over Russia at this point. Have I seen the Tom Phillis death threats? I don't even know who that is. No, I have not seen that. One of my coworkers who I discovered was a Trump voter told me that he regretted his choice. This dude was Venezuelan. Yeah, I think there's a lot of that going around, and if the Democratic Party isn't picking it up, perhaps the left can. Saying it now. Saying it now. I always assumed that it was a given that only the most mentally ill sociopaths could be a functioning CEO. Yeah, I think most people just disagree with what's involved. Maybe even politicians too. You have to be okay with stepping on the jaws of whoever may come in the way of profits or dividends to investors. Yeah. DeepSeek is the best AI I've found, at least if I'm not asking it about China. Well, and even if you download it and run an offline copy, you can ask it about China then. It's just because it's hosted in China, and so they put limits on it there. But that won't apply with an offline copy, where you can give it internet access yourself. In the early days of Bitcoin mining, people were giving their brains heat damage with all the overclocked GPUs they were sleeping next to. Yeah, it's wild. It's like they found a way to just throw fossil fuels down the drain completely. The EU, Macron and Merz, is ramping up defense spending as they're coming into conflict with the US, and they're drifting away from supporting Ukraine against Russia. Yes, I've seen that. Scrolling down here. It took initially reading Marx for me to fully snap out of it with capitalism. It's put words into things. It put into words things I was feeling but couldn't articulate at the time. I know that feeling. Even, with my first sociology class back in the day, just getting doing the vocab flashcards for Soc 101, just life-changing. Like, there's a word for that, and now I can, now my people watching can take on this whole new dimension if I can articulate things. Why don't I stream on YouTube? I would get more viewers on there, but I don't want 800 viewers because it's just going to be a shit show. So we do these on Twitch because it's a little bit easier to run as more of like a classroom. We can have more of a discussion here. That's why. I also have raids off here for that reason. Just getting flooded with 300 viewers is just not conducive to having any kind of interaction with the audience. We're all doing this thing together is how I see it. All right, scrolling down. I'm a programmer. I'm never paying for that ChatGPT shit. Tesla, love that. The maximum robot I want is a Roomba to help me clean because I have ADHD. This is the technophobia section of the stream. I think technophobia is valid when we're talking about autonomous androids. The only robot I want is Bender from Futurama. I'm not sure there is a robot I would want. Somewhere Isaac Asimov's ghost is screaming in a metal form. Tell me a single way, there's maybe some really dangerous industries robots would be good for. Aside from normal civilian life and towns and cities, I don't want robots there. I really, really don't. I don't even like them in the supermarket where they check inventory. They creep me out. The Luddites were based. Don't buy into the anti-labor organizing slur. Speaking of AI, today I received a call and the ID said WellSpan Health, and I answered thinking maybe one of my loved ones was injured or ill, but it was a fucking AI voice assistant trying to sell me something. Yeah. They're trying to actually bring that in. There's ads all over social media for BetterHelp, which is an online therapy service, which is therapists, underpaid therapists, giving people therapy online, telehealth. And they're trying to replace it with AI. They're trying to replace people who have gotten at least a master's degree, highly, highly trained people who obviously have feelings. It helps when you're doing therapy with AI. And there's a lot of venture capital firms getting involved in that, thinking that is the future of mental health. And Probably not. Elon Musk today is a Musk promise tracker, including dates and sources. I will really enjoy looking at that. Guys, it'll be great. You've never seen me run a business before. It's just like Trump. Like, he's a perfect match for Trump. You know, coming from a rich family, starting out super privileged, and then just running tons of business failures. Now, to be fair, a lot of businesses fail, but they seem pretty good at tanking them. Let's see. Tesla sales went down 95% in Germany. Yeah, I think France was where they went down 75%. But he's specifically trying to interfere in the election in Germany for AfD. Being on Red Note, it's funny. I really like the people, but it really does look like China's revisionist as fuck. And from what I've seen, they don't seem to fully understand what's going on here. Already bent by Dungism, sadly. I can completely see it. I love how Musk shot himself in the foot with a gaming idiocy. Do you mean where he paid somebody to pretend to be him as like an expert gamer on something? That's like third grade level stuff. Like pretending to be better at video games than you are. I mean, and even then it would be pretty transparent. Like, oh yeah, I beat whatever. Like, no, you did. Oh yeah, what happens at the end? Like, you'd be mocked pretty hard for that even back in grade school. Like, just beat the game, or just say you can't beat it. It's totally fine. But I've told like 100 people about Fascism and Social Revolution, best book ever. It's a key one for people to read right now. I mean, really key for people to know what fascism is. Elon lost the gamer vote. UK needs to be careful. Keep Elon from platforming Tommy Robinson. Entryism is what Kshama Sawant is doing with Workers' Fight Back and the Green Party. It's pretty obvious. I've been following that, but that sounds likely to me. Trots are very annoying. I thought the newspaper thing was a meme. No. That is very real. I've been fortunate in not ever running into Trots directly. That is true. Ralph Nader was just on Democracy Now! Calling Putin a radical communist. I gotta watch that one. We do have a lot of work to do. The more I learn about Trotskyism, the more I learn the only kind of permanent revolution they have is a permanent counter-revolution. Zing. Would it be better to help build up a mass party or join and help build up a small, seemingly anti-revisionist Marxist-Leninist group party near you? Why not both? I mean, really, I think that's more the model we need, is like, do both. I mean, because a lot of those small groups are not even parties yet. They're more like pre-party formations or study groups. DSA does formally have a ban on dual membership with DSA and an organization which adheres to democratic centralism. I think that is specifically an anti-Trotskyist, anti-entryism thing. But there's obviously no prohibition on Marxist-Leninist caucuses within it, or being part of a small study group or whatever. So I think there's a lot you can do with that. Oh yeah, and the Communist Caucus too. They're the left-com wing. Is another. Yeah, there's several communist things. I've looked at their reading list. I'm going to be doing more of the Marxist Unity Group reading list later on. I think that might be in the fall. I can't remember off the top of my head. You can join any caucus's Discord if you email them. Luke from Marxist Unity Group suggested people should start there. Other than just being in DSA to begin with, it's a great first step. Is there any benefit working within multiple organizations as long as you're maintaining the same line among them? I'm not sure that's really necessary. And honestly, if you're in, I think, again, like a mass group, and then you want to be in the right big tent group for you, and you want to find one good small study group, and, that should take up most of your time. Like, if you're in the right group, you shouldn't really have time for much else, I would not see that as being beneficial. The idea is not just to be in like as many things as you can. It's to like connect with the people you need to connect with. As someone who works getting grassroots underground musicians to get together and actually talk to each other and form a real community and support network, being part of something where there is real democracy is a great feeling. Even being part of a union does it for me too, especially once these guys got more organized after the last contract fight. We threatened to strike, and even just the threat made the company back off and stop trying to force us on a 3-day, 4-day schedule. We also got seniority clauses strengthened and for them to contribute more to our healthcare. Glad to hear it. So that was from Doug, who did the on being in a yellow union thing that we read a while ago in a live stream, and it's its own video on the channel too. So good. I'm glad to hear it. I remember you said it wasn't going that well for a while, but even just threatening a strike got you some of what you wanted. So there you go. Lenin said we should learn from liberals on matters of production. Well, yeah. So that was in the first time anyone had ever tried to build a socialist economy on like a national scale. The only example that they had was large-scale capitalism. So like they had to, and this was something Lenin said consistently about culture too. We want to take the high points of culture as developed under capitalism, as opposed to like feudalism, which has, you know, a more underdeveloped culture. We want to take the heights of the good things about capitalism, or the good things that capitalism has produced. Obviously, not the alienation and exploitation, but some of the large-scale culture that it's produced and the ways of organizing large-scale production, and then bring those into a socialist context. The idea being it's not devolving into small proprietor anarchist production, which is what the anarchists offer. But we want to take that large-scale, large-scope production and culture and then bring it under worker control. So at that time, in the late 19-teens, early 1920s, this was the only example they had. Now, there have been multiple examples of actually building socialism to learn from. But yeah, so, learn from the organizers of the trusts, the big corporations, because they were doing large-scale production of the type that socialism needs as a starting point to build off of and keep the production going higher and higher to keep overcoming scarcity. I found being in multiple organizations to be really useful in my area. CPUSA and DSA are really close here, and there's a mutual aid work that the two groups do in tandem. Is CPUSA as a whole still supportive toward liberal collaboration? Unfortunately, it is. It's the main reason I'm no longer with them officially, but I met a few comrades there that I really would trust my life with, so it depends on your chapters, and that's what I'm saying. If you're going to do liberalism, at least do it in an organization not pretending it's Marxism-Leninism. But if it's what you got, you can maybe meet some good people there and start something with them. Oh, so Red Star does have a newsletter. redstarcaucus.org/tag/newsletter. Thank you. And then also Marxist Unity Group has a newsletter, Light and Air. Light and Air. Red Star sounds really good, but I still think that the Marxist Unity Group line is a little stronger, as flawed as it is. I really don't know. I can see good MLs joining either one. And then somebody's saying, here's a bunch of resources for organizing people, mostly Northeast-oriented, and is Linktree/Mass Left Resources. ACB mentioned bringing Atlas back to attention. Atlas, you were a founding member of ACB. Ask you anything. I mean, what do you think was the most important thing to know for people trying to organize an anti-revisionist Marxist-Leninist study group or pre-party formation? While we're waiting for that answer, there might be local labor parties in your area. WorkersPartyMA.org has S4A audiobook reading sessions. Okay. Their state house candidate, this looks like Massachusetts, Andrew Nelson, got 20% of the vote in his district. Cool. Glad people are finding this shit useful. That's why I'm putting it out there, absolutely. I think I started saying this before. People say, thanks for the channel, or they like the channel. Thank you for taking the time to study, because it's people like you, dedicated activists committed to learning the right way to do this, learning from history, in other words, that are going to be able to give us a future. We don't really have one without it. So thank you for taking the time to study. I knew Midwestern Marx was going the wrong way when they asserted that Lenin thought the revolution after the fact could have been done peacefully. What? They had a 5-year civil war. That immediately made me raise an eyebrow. Each generation out of relative obscurity must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. Fanon. Amazing book on this, talking about the great power chauvinism and its destructive effects in the U.S. Endless Holocausts, A History of Mass Death in the United States by David Michael Smith. Invaluable resource. Bernie thinks the USA supported democracy for the last 250 years. National Socialist ghoul. Somebody else says, I wish Bernie would just go away and shut the fuck up. Are libertarian socialists allowed in here? Yes, but no one wants you to start pushing anarchism, so you're welcome to like be in here and be normal, yeah. Thoughts on JFK releases exposing that the Hungarian Revolution was a CIA op. I haven't seen that. That makes me want to read them now. DSA doesn't usually enforce the ban on democratic centralist groups and is there to block entryism attempts. So, like, for individual members, it's probably not going to be an issue. I haven't seen it personally, but I'm sure it has happened before. I know they have an antagonistic relationship with Kashama Sawant, which might be why, if what people are saying about them trying to take over the Greens is true, that might be why they switched over to a different vehicle. I very much enjoy your content as I struggle with reading. Your audiobooks help a lot. Happy to catch you live. Well, welcome, and as I always say, thank you for studying and trying to help the left get where it needs to be. Can you DM? Yeah, people usually DM through Discord. It's just socialism for all, one word. I think I'm going to have to okay, we're actually, Greens need a policy to keep out trots. Greens need a lot of things. Greens really need a lot of things. All right, we're coming up on 4 hours, and I think I'm just going to do the COVID thing and leave some of the rest of this for next time. Oh, this one's short. So this is just a real quick tweet from Gallup, the polling agency. 46% of Americans express support for Israel. That's less than half, in case, just to emphasize that. This is the lowest rating in 25 years of Gallup's annual tracking of this measure on its World Affairs Survey. And so you see American sympathies in the Middle East situation, 2001 to 2025. Support for Israel steadily dropping since 2018. And support for Palestine steadily rising. So Israel at 46%, Palestine at 33%, but growing. So there we go. And it was growing well before the current genocide. The support for Palestine has been growing since 2017. So it really started changing around 2017. Interesting. Where the two lines are converging. And it looks like if current trends hold within 4 or 5 years, that'll have flip-flopped. Interesting. That would still have support for Palestine at below 50%, but higher than Israel. And if you break that down by party, by the way, about 50% of Democratic voters support Israel. 80% of Republican voters support Israel. And let's, though, talk as a closing note today. In the past week, on 3/15, March 15, was LongCOVID Awareness Day. And I didn't put up a community post for it at the time, but I do want to cover it here. So I have a couple of things. First of all, we've been talking a lot about mass organizing, and I want to plug maskblock.org. maskbloc.org, maskblock.org. And so these are active mask blocks around the world. Blocks provide masks, COVID-19 tests, and other equipment to their communities for free. So if you're looking for a project to get involved with, you may be able to find something here, the group in your area, and here's like, you can actually keep scrolling down and there's like a lot more listed. There may or may not be an active group in your area, but if there is, this can be another good place to meet COVID-conscious people and provide public health community support. This is something that the government should be doing, but it needs to get done. And if it comes down to, local mutual aid volunteers to do it, so be it. So maskblock.org to get involved with that. let me just say I have a couple of short COVID articles. So why are we talking about COVID at all? Again, Long COVID Awareness Day. Well, long COVID continues to be a problem. Here's a study out of CIDRAP from the University of Minnesota Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy. Headline: study shows that for most, long COVID symptoms persist into the second year. And it says it's from January 24 by Stephanie Souchere. A new study based on German long COVID patients shows 68% experience the same symptoms in year 2 as in year 1 of the chronic condition. So if you're not familiar with long COVID, this is after your initial COVID infection, after that first 2 to 4 weeks of you get infected, you have your initial round of symptoms, and then they subside. Well, long COVID is complications of that infection that arise and persist months later. And as it says here, for most people who have post-COVID complications or sequelae, also known as long COVID, that for most people, 68%, according to this German study, persists actually into year 2. So they don't go away and really persist for a long time. So what do these involve? We'll get into that. It says the study published yesterday in PLOS Medicine adds to the current understanding of the long-term prognosis of post-COVID-19 syndrome. The nested population-based case control study compared 982 people, ages 18 to 65 years, diagnosed as having self-assessed long COVID, to 576 control patients who did not have the condition. Study participants underwent neurocognitive, cardiopulmonary exercise, and laboratory testing an average of 9.1 months, or phase 2, after their initial long COVID assessment. The mean age of the patients was 48 years, 65% were female. We know that long COVID is, for reasons still not well understood, more common in women than in men. Phase 1 of the study was 6 to 12 months after infection, while phase 2 was a median of 8.5 months after that, range 3 to 14 months. 2/3 of the 980 participants with PCS in phase 1 were considered to have persistent post-COVID syndrome, according to the author's working definition. Most of the 32% of long COVID patients who reported an improvement at follow-up during phase 2 did not fully recover, just a significant reduction. One of the things that was common was exercise intolerance or post-exertional malaise. That was seen in 36% of participants with long COVID, and then symptoms compatible with myalgic encephalomyelitis or chronic fatigue syndrome were seen in 12% of persistent post-COVID syndrome patients. During exercise tests, people with long COVID had significant reductions in hand grip strength, maximal oxygen consumption, and ventilatory efficiency, which is how well the body exchanges oxygen, which is, of course, a constant need in your body. Almost half of the long COVID patients reported breathlessness as a moderate to severe symptom. In the majority of patients, PCS symptoms did not improve in the second year of their illness and typically continued to include fatigue and measurable exercise intolerance and cognition deficits, but there seemed to be no major pathology in laboratory investigations. Patients with persistent PCS were less frequently never smokers and more often obese, with higher mean values for body mass index and body fat, and lower educational status, according to the authors. The results call for the inclusion of cognitive and exercise testing in the clinical evaluation and monitoring of patients with suspected PCS, the authors concluded. And there's a sort of addendum here: long COVID signature identified by AI. In other long COVID news, artificial intelligence may be able to detect a long COVID molecular signature in the blood of patients, according to a study based on samples taken from a cohort of Italian children. The study was published today in Pediatric Research and is based on samples taken from 112 children ages 0 to 19 years. Among them, 34 had a clinical diagnosis of long COVID, 32 had an active infection at the time of the study, 27 had multisystem inflammatory syndrome, or MISC, and 19 served as healthy controls. An artificial intelligence model based on protein profiling was able to identify long COVID with an accuracy of 0.93, a specificity of 0.86, and a sensitivity of 0.97, the authors said. The findings could be the basis of diagnostic tests for long COVID. Moreover, they suggest that the pediatric long COVID patients have the same pro-inflammatory blood markers seen in adult patients. So this has been one of the things with long COVID, which got an official diagnostic code well after the pandemic was underway, and they've been looking for a biomarker, something identifiable in the body of people who have long COVID. They found something. I know we did a study a while back about researchers in Boston who found a biomarker, some kind of protein or something in the blood that was present in 60% of the long COVID people, and none of the controls, but it wasn't in all of the long COVID people. So it looks like long COVID may have different indicators for different people, but at least that AI analysis was able to, identify with a great degree of accuracy people who have long COVID. Still working on what exactly is going on, because it seems to incorporate a broad range of inflammatory and other pathologies. What else do we have? Under long COVID. So a quick one again from SIDRAP. Analysis shows significant financial burden of long COVID in the U.S. So this is again from the same author, January 23rd. Managing long COVID cases could cost U.S. employers $2 billion to $6.5 billion annually, according to a new model published yesterday in the Journal of Infectious Diseases. The model estimates current and future financial burdens related to long COVID, which affects an estimated 44.7 million to 48 million Americans. The model took into account the clinical course, health effects, and associated costs of a person with long COVID for 1 year. On average, it assumes each person would cost $5,084 to $11,646, with men accounting for $9,432 in productivity losses, 24% absenteeism, and 76% presenteeism. That's a word I've never seen before. Approximately 92.5% to 95.2%. At 4 hours into the stream, little things like that can fuck with you. Of these costs come from productivity losses. $2 billion annually. Using current estimates of U.S. long COVID burden, assuming the probability of long COVID is 6% and symptoms last 1 year, which we're just reading in the last article, they often extend beyond a year. Cases cost an average of $2.01 billion annually. The economic burden of long COVID already surpasses that of carpal tunnel, Lyme disease, and psoriasis, the author said, and is likely to continue to grow. Long COVID could end up costing U.S. society $2 billion to $6.5 billion, employers about the same amount, and third-party payers $21 million to $69 million annually. Since the SARS coronavirus 2 virus is expected to continue circulating throughout the U.S., the number of people suffering from long COVID will continue to grow with each passing year, adding to the already significant total that has resulted from the COVID-19 pandemic. If the incidence of COVID is 100 per 10,000 persons, similar to that seen in 2023, the author said, every 10-point increase in COVID incidence results in an additional $365 million in total costs. So there you go. All kinds of reasons long COVID is no good. A couple more COVID things, then we're going to wrap up for today. All right, and then we've got an article here from some local news, WALB News 10, Unexpected Aftermath, the COVID Heart. Well, let me just say, it's unexpected if you haven't been paying any attention to research about COVID for the last, 5 years or so. But really, no. I mean, COVID's effects on the heart are very well known. We've covered it countless times here on the channel. But anyway, let's do it one more time. This is from the Ivanhoe Newswire, published February 4, 2025. At Cleveland, Ohio, when COVID-19 swept across the globe, isolation, social distancing, and wearing masks became the norm. Since then, more than 20 million people have lost their lives to the virus, and now a new risk for anyone who has ever tested positive. Quote, well, not really new again. This has been well known for quite a while. I mean, brain damage, heart damage, liver damage, kidney damage, all kinds of major organ damage is common. COVID really, really messes up your body. Immune damage, you name it. But anyway, quote, what was surprising to find is just having a COVID positive test was associated with a twofold increased risk in heart attack, stroke, and death risk, said Stanley Hazen, MD, cardiologist for preventative cardiology and rehabilitation at Cleveland Clinic. In a study of more than 250,000 people, Dr. Hazen found that the risk wasn't just immediately after the virus runs its course. Well, again, we've known that for years. Quote, the risk extends for as long as follow-up information was available. So as far out to, yeah, that's not a correct sentence. But anyway, out to 3 years, basically. And the worse the infection, the higher the risk of heart attack, stroke, and death. That's exactly what we found. Like if you've been hospitalized, your odds of long COVID go up to like 50 or 60%. Your odds of, kidney damage go way up, etc. So this is actually well known. Quote, people who had severe COVID were at an even substantial... Oh, this is really badly written. Sometimes you just really got to pause and take it in. People who had severe COVID were at an even more substantially increased risk, not twofold, but 3 to 7-fold increased risk. I like that they included the but 3 to 7-fold. Nice. If they had severe COVID, meaning they were hospitalized for their COVID, the risk was equivalent as if they had had one heart attack, stated Dr. Hazen. So do you want to catch a virus that is like equivalent to having a heart attack? I don't. And the long-term risk for heart disease following a COVID infection was true for anyone, even if you don't have any other risk factors for heart disease. Quote, COVID doesn't care if you're a man or a woman, young, old, or have pre-existing disease or not, explained Dr. Hazen. What can you do? Quote, so preventative efforts such as vaccines and boosters we anticipate will reduce your long-term risk for post-COVID cardiovascular disease. And no mention of masks, of fucking course. Mask up. N95, N99, P100. You need at least an N95 mask. There's KN95s. They're more likely to be counterfeit in the U.S. because that's not a U.S. standard. But there's also the FFP2 and FFP3. That's like another standard. But the U.S. standard is N95 or better, a higher number than 95, or a P100. That's what you want as an actually reliable way, very, high reliability way of keeping the virus out of your body. Best way to avoid long COVID is to avoid short COVID. And that doesn't just mean vaxxing and relaxing like this fucking idiot is telling you. So you want to mask up, don't get COVID. We want to say maskblock.org again. Get masks. They're pretty cheap. I mean, not to like plug Amazon, but I happen to know Amazon's got masks on there for like, you can get them for 70 cents each, so a 20 pack for like $15. They're not that expensive, and you can wear them for a while too. So I mean, you could, depending on what you're breathing in, I mean, even if you just ration it to like one a week, it's going to take you through almost half the year for under $20. You can do that. Experiment with different ones to find one that's comfortable for you as far as a mask. But a lot of people like 3M brand, like the tape and chemical company, 3M Aura, AURA. A lot of people, there's a couple of different Aura models, but a lot of people find them comfortable and they work pretty well, but just find one that works for you. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, the vaccines, and they're not boosters actually, they're new vaccines against new strains of it. Do get those, but that's your plan B. Plan A is keep it out of your body. You get the plan B in case you have a mask failure and you get infected anyway. You want to stay up to date on the shots unless you have some, immune condition or something where you're like, care provider has told you not to get one. But everybody else should stay current on that. But really just mask. So anyway, he hopes physicians will now ask their patients about their COVID history and help protect their hearts as well. Previous research found that people who have A, B, or AB blood types are more susceptible to contracting COVID-19. And now this new study found people who got COVID and have a blood type other than O had a 65% risk of experiencing a heart attack or stroke compared to people who are type O. So you have type O blood, you have a lower risk of heart attack or stroke. If you don't have type O blood, then higher risk. But yeah, I know people, especially, somebody who's like a little bit overweight, so like a little bit of a risk there. But I mean, they were under 40, had a fucking heart attack, and it was like 3 months after COVID. So do the math, you know? It's the heart attack virus. Not to mention the stroke virus and the deep vein thrombosis or potentially lethal blood clot virus, and it's the diabetes virus, and it's the brain damage and cognitive and emotional impairment virus. So it's the kill T cells, so impair your immune system virus. You really, really, really don't want this virus. Mask up and help distribute masks, maskblock.org, BLOC.org. There was another article I had on COVID. Honestly, I'm like too tired to read it at this point, but I'll put a link in the video description to it. It was from the New York Times. Somebody shared a gift article, and basically it was this. I swear, the New York Times, the COVID alarmists were closer to the truth than anyone else. Well, nice of you to say so now, you know? I don't know what it is with the New York Times writing these like really twisted headlines, but there's that New York Times PitchBot account on social media that just constantly mocks the New York Times and how they like frame their articles. This is a great example of like should be parody. The COVID alarmists were closer to the truth than anyone else. Then I guess we weren't fucking alarmists. So frustrating. We'll leave that one there because the whole thing is just this twisted. I don't know what it takes to be a New York Times liberal, but like I can't do it. There's a reason I'm a communist and not one of these people. We'll leave that there. I'll put the link in the description for people who want to torture themselves. But let's get back to the chat and we will close out today's stream. Actually, you know what we're going to do while we do that? We're going to go and thank the patrons. Patreon.com/socialismforall, buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. I've actually had a couple of people pledge on Substack too, which is socialismforall.substack.com. I don't have payments on Substack, but I've had a few people like trying to pay me through that. Just go to Patreon or buy me a coffee for now. Maybe I'll open that up at some point. And I finally on this graphic put up what the color codes mean. I've mentioned that before, but basically white is less than a year support. Yellow is a year after that. Green is 2 to 3 years support. Blue is 3 to 4 years support. And purple is 4 to 5 years support, which is, well, we've been doing this channel for 5 years, so that's the most that we have right now. But, you know, really want to thank people because, as I've said before, seeing all the people show up and getting value out of this that they're willing to pay to support has made a huge difference. You all are the ones that I'm doing this for first and foremost, and you're helping to fund it for a lot of other people as well. So big thanks there. And again, if you want to get your name on the screen, patreon.com/socialismforall or buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. You can do recurring on either, and then Buy Me a Coffee is a little more set up for one-time donations. So we'll leave that up there to thank these wonderful folks while we close out the chat. I saw a video of someone molding Jolly Ranchers into D&D dice to freak out their D&D group by chomping on the dice mid-game. That's funny. The dice are one of the few things I'm superstitious about. In what way? I just love rolling. That was like always my favorite part of playing board games as a kid. Is like, oh, I get to roll the dice. It's just fun. It's exciting. What number is going to come up? I don't know. It's simple pleasures. I really appreciate you still talking about COVID. Well, I know you were having major health problems after it. I mean, I still have health issues after it. It was terrible. You know, I survived, but like I was very impaired for a while. And still, you know, struggling with certain things. Obligatory data report YouTube channel shill. Also David Herger on Twitter, essential COVID awareness channels. I'd be fascinated to study if COVID-related exercise intolerance is related to dysautonomic conditions like POTS. I think a lot of it's poor oxygen flow, like it's lung damage, I think is a lot of it, but possibly. If you're in this chat, you are some of the most revolutionary people out there. We need you to have your health. We need you to have your wits about you. Can't lose any of our potential to this disease capital is trying to make everyone forget. Well said. My mom just had a heart stint and 2 cancer removal surgeries in 1 year. Sorry to hear that. She's had COVID 3 or 4 times. Mask up. Yeah, the COVID infections are not doing her health any favors. I hope she's able to keep masking and stuff. A couple of weeks ago, we reached 1,000 COVID deaths in a day in the U.S. I have backed off of following it as closely, largely because I mask and I've kind of I forget about it now. We covered it so much, and it's, you know, as far as the heart damage, the immune damage, all this stuff. Like I've read enough. Like I'm never not masking. So for me, like I kind of left it at that. It's so stressful seeing that it's still going on. It really, really is, and that's why I haven't been covering it more. But I still do put up, the occasional thing about it. I just, I don't know. I mask, and maybe I should cover it a little more often. Like make sure to do it at least once a month. But yeah, if you've been avoiding your booster because of side effects, hunt down where Novavax is available. It has limited to no side effects. And again, it'd be dangerous to generalize like that for people. I actually got COVID arm after getting Novavax once, but otherwise I had no side effects from it at all. So, I mean, there definitely can be side effects, but it tends to be lower. I think a lot of people have reported it tends to be lower than the mRNA ones, but still, the mRNA is better than nothing. I think it's the cancer virus as well. Well, if it has those effects on the immune system, then yeah. All right, well, that's going to be it for today. I want to thank everybody who showed up. We're down to 44 viewers, but yeah, I really appreciate everybody coming out, helping to make this what it is. Thanks again to the patrons and Buy Me Coffee supporters and everybody else who has sent in articles and ideas and constructive thoughts. Really appreciate you all, and we will see you in the next video.